When three black SUVs rolled into the quiet Vermont square at closing time, Naomi Hart knew her carefully rebuilt life was about to shatter. The man who stepped out wasn't a stranger. He was the ghost of a promise made 20 years ago on a broken bridge by two damaged children. Roman Varela had returned, but not as the bruised boy who'd sworn to come back when he was strong enough to protect her. He'd become something else entirely, a feared crime lord from New York, wrapped in expensive suits and cold control, bringing a warning that would change everything. His enemies were coming, and she was the target. If you're drawn to stories where dangerous men face impossible choices and buried love refuses to stay dead, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first snowflakes of November were just beginning to fall when Naomi Hart locked the front door of Stone and Spine Books and turned to face the empty square. It was the kind of evening she'd grown to love over the past decade. Quiet, predictable, safe. The street lamps cast warm pools of light across the brick sidewalks, and somewhere down Main Street, she could hear the muffled laughter from Murphy's Tavern, where the locals gathered on Friday nights. She pulled her coat tighter and was reaching for her keys when the sound cut through the silence. Not one engine. 3. The black SUVs appeared at the far end of Main Street like something from another world, moving in perfect formation through the small-town darkness. They were too sleek, too expensive, too deliberately intimidating for a place like Millbrook Falls. Naomi's hand froze on her keychain as the vehicles rolled to a synchronized stop in front of her bookstore, their tinted windows revealing nothing. Her heart was already racing before the rear door of the center SUV opened. The man who emerged moved with the kind of control that made everything around him seem chaotic by comparison. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. But it wasn't the expensive clothing that made Naomi's breath catch in her throat. It was the face. Older, harder, marked by experiences she couldn't begin to imagine, but still unmistakably the face that had haunted her dreams for 20 years. Roman. His name came out as barely a whisper, lost in the cold November air. He heard it anyway. Those dark eyes, the same eyes that had watched her from across broken foster home dinner tables and held her gaze on the night he disappeared, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her legs weak. Naomi. His voice had changed, deeper now, rougher, carrying an edge that hadn't been there when they were kids. We need to talk. 4 men had emerged from the other vehicles, spreading out in a formation that was clearly practiced. They weren't obviously armed, but Naomi had lived enough life to recognize protection detail when she saw it. Her mind was racing, trying to reconcile the boy she'd known with this stranger who commanded armed men like pieces on a chessboard. "What are you doing here?" The question came out sharper than she'd intended, but fear had a way of turning itself into anger. "It's been 20 years, Roman. 20 years of nothing, and you just show up with an army?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or regret. It was gone too quickly for her to be sure. "I know." He took a step closer, and she saw one of his men tense. Roman raised a hand slightly, and the man relaxed. The casual authority in that gesture told her more about what Roman had become than any words could have. "I know I have no right to be here. I know I should have stayed away. But I couldn't." "Why not?" She hated how her voice shook. "You managed just fine for 2 decades. Because they found out about you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Roman's expression had gone completely still, that careful control she was starting to recognize as his armor against the world. But his eyes, those eyes were screaming. "Who found out about me?" Naomi asked, even though part of her didn't want to know the answer. "Roman, what are you talking about?" He glanced around the square, his gaze cataloging every shadow, every potential threat. "Not here. Inside." "Absolutely not." She crossed her arms, a defensive gesture she'd learned in the years after he'd left. "You don't get to disappear from my life and then show up demanding things. If you have something to say it right here." Roman's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he might argue. Instead, he turned to the nearest man, a stocky guy with a scar across his left eyebrow, and spoke in a low voice. "Establish a perimeter, 2-block radius. Nobody gets close without clearance." The man nodded and spoke quietly into his radio. Within seconds, the other 3 were moving, disappearing into the darkness with disturbing efficiency. You're scaring me, Naomi said, and she hated that it was true. This isn't Roman. This isn't normal. What happened to you? Life happened. He moved closer, and she could see the weariness etched into his features now, hidden beneath that carefully controlled exterior. The same life that happened to both of us, except I stopped running from it. I turned around and fought back, and I got very good at fighting, and now... He paused, seeming to search for the right words. Now I'm the kind of man other dangerous men are afraid of. A crime boss. The words tasted bitter. That's what you became. That's what you chose. Yes. No hesitation, no excuses. I run most of the organized crime operations in New York. Gambling, protection, money laundering, shipping. I built an empire out of blood and fear and the same kind of damage that broke us both as kids. And for 15 years, I told myself it was worth it because I was finally strong enough, finally powerful enough. Nobody could hurt me anymore. Naomi felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Then why are you here, Roman? If you're so powerful, if you built this perfect criminal empire, why come back? Because I was wrong. His voice cracked slightly on the words. I thought I could keep you separate. I thought if I never contacted you, never came back, you'd be safe from everything I'd become. But Dante Morello is trying to take over my territory, and he's the kind of man who digs into your past looking for leverage. 3 weeks ago, one of his people found our old foster care records, found the reports from the night on the bridge, found every piece of paper that proves you mattered to me. The bridge. The memory hit her with the force of a freight train, 2 scared teenagers standing on crumbling stone, Roman's face bruised from another beating, his voice hoarse as he made her a promise. I'm going to get strong enough to protect you. I'm going to come back when nobody can hurt us anymore. She'd waited 5 years before accepting that he was never coming back. So what? Naomi's voice was hollow. He found out we knew each other as kids. That doesn't mean anything. We were foster siblings for 8 months, Roman. That's all. We were never siblings. The words came out low and fierce. Not for 1 second. And Dante knows that. He knows that if he wants to hurt me, the fastest way is through you. So he's going to send someone here. Could be next week. Could be tomorrow. But they're coming, Naomi, and I need you to understand that when they do, they won't ask questions first. The street lamp seemed to be flickering, or maybe that was just her vision going spotty. Naomi reached out to steady herself against the bookstore's window, her palm pressed flat against the cold glass. You should have stayed away, she whispered. If coming back puts me in danger, you were already in danger the moment Dante found those records. Roman's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. Me being here doesn't change that. The only thing my presence changes is that now you have protection. Now you have a chance. Protection. She laughed and it came out broken. From your world, from your enemies. You brought this to my door, Roman. You brought all of this darkness back into my life, and you're calling it protection? I know. The raw honesty in his voice made her look up. I know I'm poison. I know everything I touch turns ugly. But I couldn't stay away, Naomi. Not when I knew what was coming. I'd rather have you hate me and breathing than live with the alternative. She wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him to get back in his expensive SUV and take his armed men and his dangerous world far away from her quiet bookstore and her carefully constructed peace. But the terrifying truth was that part of her, some deeply buried part that had never stopped waiting on that bridge, was glad he was here. I need to sit down, she said finally. Roman gestured to one of the remaining men, who immediately produced a set of keys. There's a house 2 blocks over, already secured. You can... No, Naomi cut him off. My apartment. Above the store. I'm not going anywhere with you until you explain exactly what you expect me to do about this situation you've created. She could see him weighing the security concerns against her need for familiar ground. Finally, he nodded. Inside, then. But my people stay outside. Your people can do whatever they want, Naomi said, unlocking the bookstore door with shaking hands. As long as they stay out of my sight. The bookstore smelled like old paper and vanilla candles, the same combination she'd carefully cultivated over years of building this safe space. Roman stepped inside and looked around with an expression she couldn't read, something between nostalgia and pain. You always talked about owning a bookstore, he said quietly. Back when we were kids. Said you'd fill it with all the stories that gave you somewhere to escape to. Yeah, well, Naomi locked the door behind them and led him toward the back stairs. Turns out some of us actually work toward normal dreams instead of building criminal empires. The words were meant to hurt, and from the way his shoulders tensed, they hit their mark. Good. She wanted him to hurt. Wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain she'd carried for 20 years. Her apartment above the store was small but warm. Hardwood floors, overstuffed furniture, plants in every window. The opposite of whatever cold, expensive space Roman probably lived in now. She didn't offer him a seat, just stood in the middle of her living room with her arms crossed and waited. Roman moved to the window, checking the street below with automatic precision before turning to face her. Dante Morello runs the North Jersey operations. He's been trying to expand into my territory for 5 years, and I've held him off. But 3 months ago, he made a move that should have been impossible. Hit one of my protected shipments, killed 4 of my people, took merchandise worth $2 million. The only way he could have known about that shipment was if someone inside my organization told him. You have a traitor. Naomi's mind was working despite her emotional turmoil. So this isn't just about expansion, it's about your own people turning on you. Yes. Roman's expression was grim, and before you can root out a traitor, you have to give them something worth betraying. So I've been feeding false information to different people in my organization, waiting to see which leak leads back to Dante. But while I'm doing that, he's doing his own research, trying to find leverage, trying to find something that matters enough to me that he can use it as a weapon. Me? The word came out flat. He found me. 2 weeks ago, his people started asking questions in town, subtle ones, checking property records, talking to locals at the tavern. They haven't approached you directly yet, but they will. And when they do, Naomi, you need to understand what kind of man Dante is. He's not like the criminals you see in movies. He's systematic, patient, and completely without conscience. If he thinks hurting you will give him an advantage over me, he won't hesitate. Naomi sank onto her couch, her legs finally giving out. So what do you want from me? You want me to run? Hide? Let you turn my entire life upside down because you couldn't leave the past alone? Roman crossed the room and knelt in front of her, putting himself at eye level. It was such an unexpected gesture, this feared crime boss lowering himself, that she couldn't help but meet his gaze. I want you to let me protect you, he said, and his voice had lost all its hard edges. I want you to trust that I know how to handle this, even if you don't trust anything else about me. And I want... He stopped, something vulnerable flashing across his face. I want you to know that I never forgot. Not for 1 day in 20 years did I forget the promise I made on that bridge. You said you'd come back when you were strong enough. Tears were falling now, and she didn't bother wiping them away. You said nobody would be able to hurt us. But look at this, Roman. Look at what your strength brought with it. I know. His hands were resting on his knees, close enough to touch her, but carefully maintaining distance. I know I failed you. I know the boy who made that promise turned into something you probably can't even recognize. But that boy is still in here somewhere, Naomi, and he's still trying to keep you safe, even if he's doing it all wrong. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt and betrayal and all the years of wondering why she hadn't been enough to make him come back. But looking at him now, really looking past the expensive suit and the hard exterior, she could see the truth. Whatever Roman had become, whatever empire he'd built, he'd done it carrying the same damage they'd both survived. Healed by hiding, he'd healed by fighting. Neither of them had actually healed at all. Tell me about the bridge, she said softly. Tell me what you remember. Roman's expression shifted, memories playing across his features. It was October. You'd been at the Harrisons for 2 months, and I'd been at the DeLucas for 3. I kept getting in fights at school because... He stopped, jaw tight. Because Jimmy DeLuca was beating you, Naomi finished. I saw the bruises, Roman. I knew. The night you found me on the bridge, I was planning to jump. The words came out matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. Figured it was cleaner than waiting for Jimmy to finish the job. But then you showed up. She remembered. Remembered finding him standing on the stone railing, his 13-year-old frame silhouetted against the dark water below. Remembered talking him down with stories from books, with promises that life got better, with all the desperate hope of a kid who couldn't bear to lose the only person who understood. You made me promise to stay alive, Roman continued, said the world needed good people to fight back against the bad ones. And I promised, but only if you promised something back. I promised I'd wait. Naomi's voice was barely audible. I promised I'd wait for you to get strong enough, and then we'd both be safe. I broke my promise. His hand moved finally, reaching out to brush away one of her tears. The gesture was so gentle it almost broke her. I got strong, but I didn't come back. I was so deep in the life by then, so covered in blood and violence that I convinced myself you were better off thinking I was dead. Safer if you moved on. That wasn't your choice to make. I know. He pulled his hand back. But I made it anyway, and now I'm here asking you to forgive the unforgivable, not because I deserve it, but because I need you to stay alive long enough for me to fix this. Naomi stood up, needing space to think. She walked to the window and looked down at the street where Roman's men had positioned themselves in the shadows. Professional. Efficient. Terrifying. How long? She asked. How long do you need to fix this? I don't know. Finding the traitor could take weeks or months, and even after I deal with them, I still have to handle Dante in a way that makes him understand you're completely off limits. What does handle mean in your world? Roman was quiet for a long moment. It means I make him understand that touching you is worse than death, that going after you means I stop playing by the rules of civilized crime and become something he can't survive. You'd kill him. Not a question. If I have to. No hesitation. Dante put you in danger. There's no version of this where he walks away clean. The casual way he talked about murder should have horrified her. Maybe it would have if she hadn't spent her childhood watching people like Jimmy DeLuca hurt kids without consequence. If she hadn't learned early that sometimes the world's justice system failed and you either fought back or died waiting for someone to save you. I need time to think, she said finally. It's too much, Roman. You can't just show up after 20 years and expect me to accept that my life is in danger, that I need armed guards, that the boy She stopped, catching herself. That the boy I knew turned into this. Take the time you need. Roman stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced ease. But understand that the clock is ticking. Dante's people are already here, and they're not going to wait for you to process your feelings before they make their move. How comforting, she said dryly. Something like a smile flickered across his face. You got sharper. The Naomi I remember wouldn't have thrown sarcasm like that. The Naomi you remember learned to build walls. Turns out they're useful when people you trust disappear. The hit landed. She saw it in the way his shoulders dropped, just slightly. I'll have my people maintain distance. You won't see them unless there's trouble. But they'll be there, Naomi, whether you want them or not. Typical Roman Varela, she said. Still making decisions for everyone else? Some things don't change. He moved toward the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. For leaving, for staying away, for coming back. For being the kind of man who brings danger instead of safety. If I could undo it. You can't. Naomi cut him off. So don't waste breath on hypotheticals. She stopped, unsure what she was asking for. Just don't let them hurt anyone in this town. Whatever happens between us, these people don't deserve to get caught in your war. You have my word. Roman's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. No civilian casualties. Whatever I have to do to keep this contained, I'll do it. He left without another word, his footsteps quiet on the stairs. Naomi heard the bookstore door open and close, heard the low murmur of voices as he rejoined his men outside. She stayed at the window, watching as the black SUVs pulled away into the night, leaving only shadows behind. But she knew those shadows had eyes, knew that Roman's protection detail was still out there, invisible but present. Her quiet Vermont town had become a battlefield, and she was standing in the middle of it whether she wanted to be or not. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Get some sleep. My people will keep watch. Naomi stared at the message for a long time before typing back. I don't know if I can forgive you. The response came almost immediately. I don't deserve forgiveness. I just need you alive. She set the phone down and sank back onto the couch, her mind spinning. 20 years. 20 years of building a life, of healing, of convincing herself that the boy on the bridge had been a childhood dream that couldn't survive reality. And now here he was, all grown up and dangerous and still somehow trying to protect her in the most destructive way possible. The worst part was the flutter in her chest when he'd knelt in front of her, the way her breath had caught when his hand brushed her face. Her body remembered what her mind had tried to forget, that Roman Varela had been the first person to make her feel like she mattered, like she was worth protecting. She just hadn't realized the price of that protection would be so high. The weekend passed in strange suspension. Naomi went through the motions, opened the bookstore Saturday morning, helped Mrs. Chen find a new mystery novel, recommended a children's book to the Wilsons for their granddaughter. Normal, everyday interactions that felt surreal, now that she knew armed men were watching from the shadows. She caught glimpses of them occasionally. A figure on the roof across the street, a car that seemed to circle the block too regularly. Once, she looked up from helping a customer and saw a man in a coffee shop window with his eyes locked on her bookstore entrance. The moment their gazes met, he looked away, but the message was clear. They were always watching. Roman didn't come back, but every night she received the same text. Sleep well. You're safe. She never responded, but she never deleted the messages either. On Sunday evening, she was shelving returns when the bell above her door chimed. She looked up expecting a customer and felt her heart stop. The woman who entered was stunning, mid-30s, dark hair, designer clothes that probably cost more than Naomi's car. But it was her eyes that sent warning bells screaming through Naomi's head. Cold, calculating. The eyes of someone evaluating a target. Naomi Hart. The woman's smile didn't reach those cold eyes. I'm Elena Marchese. I was hoping we could talk about a mutual friend. Naomi's hand tightened on the book she was holding. I'm sorry, I don't... Roman Varela. Elena's smile widened. Don't worry, I'm not here to hurt you. Quite the opposite, actually. I'm here to offer you a way out of the mess he's created. Every instinct Naomi had was screaming danger, but she forced herself to stay calm. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course you don't. Elena moved deeper into the store, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. That's what Roman does, isn't it? He shows up, brings chaos, and leaves everyone else to figure out what's happening. But I can explain. Would you like to know who Roman Varela really is? What he's really done? Naomi reached into her pocket slowly, fingers closing around her phone. If she could just press the emergency button. I wouldn't do that. Elena's voice was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. My associate outside has instructions to respond immediately to any signs of trouble. And by respond, I mean come in here with very little concern for your safety. So why don't we have a civilized conversation instead? The door chimed again, and Naomi's breath caught. But it wasn't one of Elena's people. It was the scarred man from Roman's team, the one he'd called his head of security. He moved with casual confidence, his hand inside his jacket in a way that made Elena freeze. Mrs. Marchese, he said politely, I'm afraid this establishment is closed for a private event. I'll have to ask you to leave. How fascinating. Elena's eyes moved between them. Roman has you on a very short leash, doesn't he, Naomi? Can't even have a conversation without his attack dog showing up. Leave, the man repeated, and this time there was no politeness in his voice. Now. Elena held up her hands in mock surrender. No need for hostility. I was just leaving. She turned to Naomi with that cold smile. Think about it, Ms. Hart. Roman brought you into a war you didn't start and can't win. But there are other options. Other people who could help you disappear from all of this. All you have to do is ask. She walked out without another word, leaving Naomi shaking in the middle of her own store. The scarred man spoke into his radio in rapid-fire Italian, then turned to her. Are you hurt? No. Naomi's voice came out steadier than she felt. Who was that? Elena Marchese, Dante's sister and his primary negotiator. His expression was grim. She specializes in finding leverage points and exploiting them. The fact that she approached you directly means they're escalating faster than we anticipated. What does that mean? It means the boss needs to know about this, now. He pulled out his phone. He's going to want to move you to a secure location. Absolutely not. Naomi found her spine again. I'm not letting Roman uproot my entire life because his enemy sent someone to talk to me. The man studied her for a moment. With respect, Ms. Hart, that wasn't just talk. That was a threat wrapped in false friendship. Dante sent his sister to make you think you have options, but the only option Elena offers is betraying the boss. And if you refuse, which I assume you will, then you've officially become an active part of this conflict. The door chimed a third time, and Roman strode in looking like controlled fury. His eyes went immediately to Naomi, scanning her from head to toe. Are you hurt? Everyone keeps asking me that, she said, trying for sarcasm to cover her fear. I'm fine. A woman came in, had a vaguely threatening conversation, and left. Your man here handled it. Elena Marchesi. Roman turned to the scarred man. How did she get past our perimeter? She didn't approach from the street, came through the back alley, probably had help mapping our positions. The man looked unhappy. We've already adjusted coverage, but they know our setup now. Roman's jaw was tight, which means this location is compromised. We need to move. No, Naomi said firmly. We don't need to do anything. I need to stay here, in my home, living my life. You need to handle your war without dragging me into it. Roman's expression softened slightly. Naomi, Elena's visit wasn't random. It was a message. Dante is telling me that he can reach you whenever he wants, and that my protection isn't good enough to stop him. So make it good enough. She crossed her arms. You're supposed to be this powerful crime boss, right? Figure it out without making me a prisoner. Something like respect flickered in Roman's eyes. You're not wrong, but you're also not seeing the full picture. Dante didn't send Elena just to threaten you. He sent her to offer you a deal. And if you'd taken it, if you'd agreed to work with them against me, you'd be just as dead as if you'd refused. Elena doesn't leave loose ends. The cold certainty in his voice made Naomi's blood run ice. You're saying she would have killed me either way? Yes. No hesitation. The moment you became useful to Dante, you became disposable. That's how he operates. That's the kind of man who found out you mattered to me. Naomi sank onto one of her reading chairs, the weight of it all finally crushing down. I can't live like this. Looking over my shoulder, wondering if everyone who walks through that door is a threat. This is my life, Roman. This bookstore is everything I built after you left. Roman knelt in front of her again, that same gesture that had undone her before. I know. And I swear to you, this isn't permanent. I'm working on ending this, but I need time. And I need you to stay alive long enough for me to finish it. How? The word came out broken. How are you going to finish something like this? His expression went cold. By making Dante understand that you're not leverage. You're a red line, and crossing it means I stop being civilized and become the monster his world whispers about. Naomi searched his face, looking for the boy she'd known. He was still there, buried deep under layers of violence and control and hard-earned power. But he was so far down now that she wasn't sure either of them could reach him. I don't want you to be a monster, she whispered. Even for me. Too late. Roman's voice was gentle, but his eyes were steel. I've been a monster for 20 years. The only question now is whether I'm a useful one. The decision to let Roman move her to a safe house lasted exactly 4 hours before Naomi changed her mind. She'd packed a bag, locked up the bookstore, and followed his security team to a renovated farmhouse 3 miles outside town. The place was beautiful in that cold, professionally decorated way, all modern appliances and security cameras, and reinforced doors that looked rustic but could probably withstand a battering ram. She hated it on sight. This isn't going to work, she told Roman, who was standing in the farmhouse kitchen reviewing security protocols with his team. I appreciate the effort, really, but I can't just hide here while my entire life sits empty back in town. Roman dismissed his men with a gesture and turned to face her. Naomi, Elena's visit proved that the bookstore isn't safe. Dante knows exactly where to find you, and he's willing to walk right up to your door to prove it. So put more security on the bookstore. She dropped her bag on the granite counter. Put cameras everywhere. Have your people do their intimidating shadow routine, whatever you need. But I'm not abandoning everything I built because your enemy wants to scare me. This isn't about fear. Roman's voice had that carefully controlled edge. This is about keeping you alive long enough to what? To finish your war. To prove to Dante that I'm not a useful target? Naomi cut him off. I heard all of this already, Roman, but you're asking me to give up my agency, my independence, everything that makes my life mine, and I won't do it, not even for you. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, but something closer to pain. You think I want this? You think I enjoy turning your world upside down? I think you're used to people doing what you tell them. She met his gaze steadily. I think you've spent 20 years building an empire where your word is law, and you've forgotten what it's like to work with someone instead of commanding them. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. Finally, Roman exhaled slowly and leaned against the counter. You're right. I did forget. It's easier to give orders than to negotiate, especially when you're terrified. You're terrified? The admission caught her off guard. Of course I am. His laugh was bitter. Elena got within 3 feet of you, Naomi. She could have had a weapon, could have grabbed you, could have done any number of things before my people reacted, and I would have been responsible for it, for bringing that danger to your door and then failing to stop it. Naomi studied him carefully. The expensive suit was gone now, replaced by dark jeans and a black sweater that made him look younger, closer to the boy she remembered. But the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the counter edge, those were new. Those belonged to a man who'd learned to carry impossible weight. Tell me about your life, she said quietly. The real version. Not the crime boss empire part, but the rest. What happened after you left the bridge that night? Roman was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. You want the whole story, or the version that lets you sleep at night? The truth. He moved to the farmhouse windows, looking out at the dark Vermont woods beyond. I aged out of foster care at 18 with $200 and a GED. Spent 6 months sleeping in my car, picking up work where I could find it, construction mostly. Manual labor that paid cash and didn't ask questions. That doesn't sound like the path to running criminal operations, Naomi said. It wasn't. The path started when I witnessed a murder. Roman's voice was flat, matter of fact. Wrong place, wrong time. I was working a night shift on a construction site in Queens when I saw 2 men execute a third in the parking lot below. They saw me see them. I ran, but they caught up at my car. Naomi's breath caught. What happened? They were going to kill me. I was 19 years old, terrified, and about 3 seconds from taking a bullet when their boss showed up. A man named Salvatore Costa. He looked at me, really looked, and asked if I was smart enough to know when to keep my mouth shut. Roman turned from the window. I said yes. He asked if I was desperate enough to work for dangerous men. I said yes to that too, and just like that, I was in. Just like that, Naomi repeated. He recruited you based on a random encounter? Salvatore had a gift for seeing potential in broken things. He looked at me and saw someone with nothing to lose, no family to threaten, no connections to exploit. The perfect soldier. Roman's expression was complicated, gratitude mixed with old grief. He took me in, taught me the business. Not just the violence, but the strategy. How to read people, how to build loyalty, how to turn fear into profit. I was good at it, better than good. What happened to him? Heart attack, 7 years ago, left me his entire operation in his will. Roman's hands were fists now. Dante was Salvatore's nephew. He expected the inheritance to go to family, not to some stray kid Salvatore had picked up off the streets. We've been at war ever since, sometimes cold, sometimes hot, but always there. Naomi absorbed this, trying to reconcile the story with the man in front of her. You loved him, Salvatore. He was the closest thing to a father I ever had. Roman's voice roughened. He saw something worth saving in me when everyone else saw trash. So yes, I loved him. And yes, I took everything he built and made it bigger, stronger, more untouchable. Because that's what you do when someone gives you a chance. You prove they were right to believe in you. The raw honesty in his words made her chest ache. She'd spent 20 years angry at Roman for leaving, for choosing violence over their promise. But standing here now, listening to him explain the life that had swallowed him, she could see the truth. He hadn't chosen this path. He'd survived into it, one desperate decision at a time, until survival had turned into power. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for what you went through. for the fact that staying alive meant becoming something you never wanted to be. Roman's laugh was sharp. Don't apologize for me, Naomi. I made choices. I could have walked away from Salvatore that night, could have taken my chances with the police, or witness protection, or any number of other options. But I didn't, because the truth is that part of me wanted this, wanted the power to make sure nobody could hurt me again. And did it work? Are you safe now? No one's ever really safe. He moved away from the window, closing the distance between them. But I'm dangerous enough that most people don't try, and for 15 years that was enough. Until Dante found out about you, and suddenly I realized that all the power in the world doesn't matter if it can't protect the one person who actually matters. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with everything they weren't saying. Naomi's heart was racing, her body hyper-aware of how close Roman was standing, close enough that she could see the faint scar above his left eyebrow, the one he'd gotten from Jimmy DeLuca the week before the bridge. Roman, she started, but he cut her off. You don't have to say anything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, don't deserve your trust, don't deserve to walk back into your life after 20 years and expect anything from you. But I need you to understand that keeping you safe isn't about obligation or guilt. It's about the fact that losing you would break something in me that's been barely holding together for 2 decades. His honesty was devastating. Naomi wanted to be angry, wanted to hold on to the hurt and betrayal that had sustained her through years of waiting. But all she could feel was the same desperate pull she'd felt at 15, the certainty that Roman Varela saw her in a way nobody else ever had. I can't stay in this safe house, she said finally. I understand why you want me here, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. But I need my life, Roman. I need the bookstore and my apartment and the routine I built. If we're going to do this, if I'm going to let you protect me, it has to be on terms I can live with. She watched him weigh her words, saw the conflict playing out behind his eyes. The crime boss in him wanted to issue orders, to lock her away where she'd be safe regardless of what she wanted. But the boy from the bridge, the one who'd promised to protect her, not control her, was fighting back. What if we compromise? He said slowly. You go back to the bookstore, maintain your routine, but I increase security to the point where Dante would need an army to get close to you. And you agree to certain protocols, checking in regularly, allowing my people to sweep your apartment daily, not going anywhere without clearance. That's not a compromise, that's house arrest with extra steps. It's the best I can offer. Roman's voice was strained. I can't risk you, Naomi. I can't walk into your bookstore one day and find... He stopped, his jaw working. I can't. The fear in his voice was real, and it softened something in her. Okay, but I have conditions. Your people stay invisible unless there's active danger. No sweeps of my apartment without my permission. And you tell me what's happening with the investigation. All of it, not just what you think I need to know. If I'm part of this, whether I want to be or not, then I deserve the full truth. Roman studied her for a long moment, then extended his hand. Deal. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Deal. The next week fell into a strange rhythm. Naomi returned to her apartment above the bookstore, and Roman's security team adjusted to her requirements. They were invisible during the day, just shadows in her peripheral vision. But at night she could see them from her window, figures on rooftops, cars making regular passes, the constant surveillance that had become her new normal. Roman himself came by every evening after she closed the store, never staying long, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, just checking in, updating her on the investigation, making sure she was okay. It was weirdly domestic, this routine they'd fallen into. Like dating, except the other person was a crime boss, and the stakes were life and death. On Thursday evening, she was shelving new arrivals when he walked in carrying 2 paper bags that smelled incredible. Chinese food, he said in response to her questioning look. From that place you used to talk about. The one in Montpellier you said had the best dumplings. Naomi stared at him. You remember that? I mentioned it once, 20 years ago. I remember everything you told me. Roman set the bags on her checkout counter. Figured you probably hadn't eaten yet. You never do when you're focused on work. The accuracy of that observation made her uncomfortable. You've been watching me that closely? My people have been watching. I've been listening to their reports and remembering things about you. He started unpacking containers. Is that creepy? It feels like it might be creepy. It's definitely creepy. But Naomi was already reaching for the dumplings. Also kind of sweet, which makes it worse. They ate in the bookstore, sitting on the floor between shelves like they'd done as kids in the library during lunch period. Roman had loosened his tie, and in the warm lighting of the store, he looked less like a dangerous criminal and more like someone she might have built a normal life with in another universe. "Tell me about the bookstore," he said, gesturing at the shelves around them. "How did this happen?" "Insurance settlement from the car accident that killed the Harrisons." Naomi picked at her low mane. "I aged out of foster care a few months later, used the money to go to community college, then transferred to UVM for a business degree. Worked in a bookstore chain for 5 years, saved every penny, and finally bought this place when the previous owner retired." "The Harrisons." Roman's voice went quiet. "They were good to you, weren't they? Before the accident?" "They were the first placement that felt like it might actually last." Naomi swallowed hard. "Mrs. Harrison was teaching me to bake. Mr. Harrison helped me with my homework every night. I was with them for 11 months when the drunk driver hit their car. They didn't die immediately, spent 2 weeks in the hospital while I waited to find out if I'd have a family or not." "Christ, Naomi. They survived, but Mr. Harrison couldn't work anymore. Brain damage from the crash. Mrs. Harrison became his full-time caretaker, and they couldn't handle a foster kid on top of that. So I got moved again." She forced a smile. "But they set up the insurance money for me before they let me go. Made sure I'd have something to start with when I aged out. So in a weird way, they still saved me." Roman reached out and took her hand. The gesture was simple, but it sent electricity up her arm. "I'm sorry I wasn't there, for any of it. You deserve better than going through all of that alone. You were going through your own hell. We both survived the only ways we knew how." Naomi didn't pull her hand away. "I just wish—" She was cut off by the sound of breaking glass. The bookstore's front window exploded inward, and something heavy thudded onto the floor between them. Roman reacted instantly, his body covering hers as he dragged her behind the checkout counter. She caught a glimpse of what had come through the window, a brick wrapped in paper. Footsteps pounded through the store as Roman's security team burst through the door, weapons drawn. Roman was already on his radio, his voice cold and controlled despite the fact that they were both covered in glass shards. "Perimeter breach, check surrounding buildings for the throw point. I want whoever did this in front of me within the hour." The scarred man, she'd learned his name was Marco, carefully picked up the brick and unwrapped the paper. His expression went dark as he read whatever was written there. "Boss," he said quietly, handing the note to Roman. Roman's face turned to stone as he scanned the message. Then he crumpled the paper in his fist and looked at Naomi with an intensity that made her breath catch. "What does it say?" she asked. "It's a chess move." Roman's voice was deadly calm. "Dante's telling me he can reach you whenever he wants. That your security is meaningless. That the only way to keep you safe is to give him what he wants. Which is? My territory, my operations, everything I built." Roman stood, helping her to her feet. "He's offering me a choice. Surrender my empire, or watch him take you apart piece by piece until I break." Naomi brushed glass from her clothes with shaking hands. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done the moment he found out about you." Roman's expression was cold fury barely contained. "I'm going to stop playing defense and remind Dante Morello exactly why people are afraid of me." Marco stepped forward. "Boss, if we go offensive, we need to be smart about it. Dante's expecting retaliation. He's probably already—" "I don't care what he's expecting." Roman cut him off. He threw a brick through Naomi's window. He brought this war to her doorstep and made it personal. So now it's personal. "Roman!" Naomi grabbed his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath his sleeve. "Don't do something stupid because you're angry. That's exactly what he wants, for you to lose control and make mistakes." He looked down at her, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The control he'd built over 20 years versus the fury of a man watching someone threaten the only person he'd ever loved. "I can't let this stand," he said quietly. "If I don't respond, Dante will escalate. The next brick might not be through a window. It might be through your skull." The blunt words made her flinch, but she didn't let go. "Then respond intelligently. You said you're good at strategy, that Salvatore taught you to think instead of just react. So think. What move does Dante not expect?" Roman stared at her for a long moment, Then something shifted in his expression. He expects me to hit back at his operations, go after his money, his people, his territory, standard organized crime retaliation. So, don't do that, Naomi said. Do something he can't predict. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Roman's face. You're brilliant and terrifying and absolutely right. He turned to Marco. Get everyone to the safe house. We need to have a strategy meeting, and someone board up this window before we leave. Within 20 minutes, the broken window was covered with plywood, and Naomi was being driven back to the farmhouse she'd sworn she wouldn't stay in. But this time felt different. This time she wasn't being hidden away, she was being included. Roman's entire operation seemed to be crammed into the farmhouse's main room. There were at least 15 people, men and women, ranging from Marco's age to what looked like a 19-year-old kid with a laptop. They all stood when Roman entered, their deference automatic and absolute. Sit, Roman commanded, and they sat. He moved to the head of the dining table, and Naomi noticed that someone had already set up maps, photos, and what looked like surveillance reports. Dante escalated tonight. He sent a message through Naomi's window, and now we're going to send one back, but we're not doing this the way he expects. A woman with short gray hair leaned forward. What are you thinking? Dante's strength comes from two things: his family connections and his reputation for being unpredictable. He inherited the Morello operations from his father, and he's built his power on the idea that he's crazy enough to do things other bosses won't. Roman spread his hands on the table. So we make him predictable. We force him into a position where he has only one move available, and that move puts him exactly where we want him. How? Marco asked. Roman's smile was sharp. By giving him what he thinks he wants. We're going to let him believe he's winning. The next hour was a masterclass in strategic thinking that Naomi could barely follow. Roman laid out a plan that involved false intelligence, staged vulnerabilities, and a traitor that apparently didn't exist but would be created through careful manipulation. His people pushed back, questioned, refined. It wasn't the dictatorial command structure she'd imagined. It was collaborative, almost academic. The problem, said the gray-haired woman, is that Dante's not stupid. If we make it too easy, he'll smell the trap. That's where Naomi comes in. Roman looked at her, and she felt everyone's attention shift. Dante already believes she's my weakness, so we use that. We stage a scenario where it looks like I'm so desperate to protect her that I'm making mistakes, leaving gaps in my defense. Absolutely not, Marco said immediately. You want to use her as bait? I want to use the idea of her as bait, Roman corrected. Naomi stays here, completely secure, but Dante gets intelligence suggesting she's vulnerable, that I've moved her to a secondary location with lighter security because I'm stretched too thin managing my operations and protecting her at the same time. Naomi's mind was racing. You create a fake version of me, somewhere Dante can actually reach. Exactly. We set up a location that looks legitimate but is actually completely controlled. When Dante makes his move, and he will, we have him. Not just his people, but him personally, because Dante won't be able to resist the chance to take you himself. And then what? Naomi asked quietly. Roman's expression went cold. Then I explained to Dante Morello that touching you was the last mistake he'll ever make. The plan took 3 days to set up. Naomi stayed at the farmhouse, watching Roman's people work with terrifying efficiency. They created a false trail suggesting she'd been moved to a rental house on the outskirts of Burlington. Someone who looked like her from a distance was photographed entering and leaving the location. Surveillance footage was carefully edited to show reduced security, gaps in coverage, opportunities. Roman barely slept, running the operation from the farmhouse while simultaneously maintaining his normal business operations to avoid suspicion. Naomi watched him work, saw the toll it took. The way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was looking. The tension headaches he tried to hide. On the third night, she found him alone in the farmhouse kitchen at 2 a.m, staring at security feeds on his laptop. You need to sleep, she said quietly. Can't. Not until this is finished. He didn't look away from the screens. Dante's people have been surveilling the Burlington house for 6 hours. They're doing their homework, checking our setup. If they bite, it'll be tomorrow night. Naomi pulled out the chair next to him and sat. What if they don't? What if Dante sees through the trap? Then I moved to plan B. Which is? There is no plan B. Roman finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes was staggering. This has to work, Naomi. Because if it doesn't, I'm out of options that don't involve you being in actual danger. She reached out and closed his laptop. Roman, look at me. When he met her gaze, she continued, whatever happens tomorrow, we'll handle it. Together. You're not alone in this anymore. I've been alone for 20 years. I don't know how to not be. Then learn. She took his hand, feeling the calluses and scars that marked his knuckles. You came back because you wanted to protect me. But maybe I need to protect you too. From this life, from yourself, from whatever's eating you alive from the inside. Roman's laugh was broken. You can't save me, Naomi. I'm too far gone for that. Maybe? Or maybe you just need someone to remind you that the boy on the bridge is still in there somewhere. Still worth saving. She squeezed his hand. Go to bed, Roman. Your people know what they're doing. Trust them to handle the overnight shift. He studied her face like he was memorizing it. If this goes wrong tomorrow, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know that coming back here was the best decision I've made in 20 years. Even if it ends badly, even if I can't keep you safe, at least I got to see you again. The raw vulnerability in his voice broke something open in her chest. Before she could second-guess herself, Naomi leaned forward and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent shockwaves through her entire body. Roman froze, his eyes wide with surprise. Naomi, don't. She pulled back slightly. Don't analyze it or apologize or explain why it's a bad idea. Just... She stopped, unsure what she was asking for. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle despite the violence those hands were capable of. I've imagined this moment for 20 years, but in my head, I was someone different, someone worthy of you. You're exactly who you need to be. Naomi kissed him again, deeper this time. Complicated and damaged and trying your best. That's all any of us can do. This time when Roman kissed her back, it wasn't gentle. It was 20 years of longing and regret and desperate hope wrapped into one moment. His hands tangled in her hair, her fingers clutched at his shirt, and for a few seconds the rest of the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea. Everything about this is a terrible idea. Probably, Naomi agreed. But I'm done running from terrible ideas, done hiding from things that scare me. If we're doing this, if we're actually trying to build something here, then I need you to be honest with me about everything. Everything? Roman pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Are you sure you want that? Because my truth is ugly, Naomi. It's violence and moral compromise and choices that keep me awake at night. I grew up in the same broken system you did. I know what ugly looks like. She held his gaze steadily. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for real. Roman was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her cheekbone. Okay, real. The truth is that I've killed people. Not many, and never without what I consider justifiable cause. But I've done it, and I'd do it again if it meant keeping you alive. Is that real enough? The confession should have terrified her. Maybe it would have if she hadn't spent years understanding that the world wasn't black and white. That sometimes good people did terrible things, and sometimes terrible people protected the things that mattered. Yes, she said simply. That's real enough. They spent what was left of the night on the farmhouse couch, wrapped around each other like teenagers afraid to let go. Naomi dozed fitfully against Roman's chest, listening to his heartbeat and the quiet sounds of his security team moving through the house. Every time she woke, he was still there, one hand in her hair, the other holding his phone as he monitored updates. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of November morning that promised snow. Naomi extracted herself from Roman's arms and went to make coffee, needing something normal to ground herself. Today was the day. Either Dante would take the bait and walk into Roman's trap, or everything would fall apart in ways she didn't want to imagine. Roman appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking rumpled and dangerous, his shirt untucked and his hair a mess from her fingers. They're moving, he said without preamble. Dante's people just rented a van in Burlington. White cargo model, no windows in the back. That's an extraction vehicle. Naomi's hands tightened on her coffee mug. So he's actually going to try it. He's going to try to take me. He thinks he is. Roman moved closer, taking the mug from her hands and setting it on the counter. But you're here, you're safe, and in about 12 hours this is all going to be over. You can't know that. The fear she'd been suppressing came bubbling up. What if something goes wrong? What if someone gets hurt? What if... He silenced her with a kiss that tasted like desperation and coffee. I won't let anything happen to you. That's the only guarantee I can give. I'm not worried about me. Naomi pulled back enough to look at him. I'm worried about you. Dante's dangerous, and you're going to be in the middle of whatever happens when he realizes it's a trap. Promise me you won't do anything stupid. Roman's smile was grim. I'm going to do whatever it takes. That's the only promise I can make. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Naomi tried to read, tried to eat, tried to do anything to stop obsessing over what was coming. Roman's people moved in and out of the farmhouse in waves, their faces grim and focused. The young kid with the laptop, Tommy, she'd learned, was running electronic surveillance on Dante's movements, calling out updates every hour. They're casing the Burlington house again. Same van, different driver this time. Dante just left his compound in Jersey. He's heading north. Van is moving. They're positioning near the Burlington house. Looks like they're waiting for nightfall. Each update wound the tension tighter. Roman was in constant motion, checking weapons, reviewing maps, coordinating with his team. Marco tried to get him to eat something and was rewarded with a look that could have stripped paint. Boss, you need to stay sharp, Marco said carefully. That means food, and at least a few hours of actual sleep before this goes down. I'm fine. You're running on fumes and rage. Neither of those will keep you alive if something goes sideways. Marco glanced at Naomi, clearly hoping for backup. She crossed the room and put herself directly in Roman's path. He's right. Go lie down for a few hours. Your people know what they're doing, and I'll wake you if anything changes. Roman looked like he wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was written all over his face. 2 hours. That's it. 2 hours, Naomi agreed, taking his hand and leading him toward the farmhouse's single bedroom. She pushed him down onto the bed and started unlacing his shoes. Sleep, Roman. I'll keep watch. He caught her wrist. Stay with me? The vulnerability in the question made her chest ache. Yeah, I'll stay. She stretched out beside him on top of the covers, and he immediately pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Naomi lay there, listening to him breathe, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. She'd kissed him. Actually kissed him, after spending 20 years trying to forget he existed. And the terrifying part was how right it had felt, how completely it had short-circuited every rational thought in her head. She should have been focused on the danger, on Dante, on the fact that her life had turned into something from a thriller novel. Instead, all she could think about was the way Roman had looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Her phone buzzed quietly, a text from an unknown number. He cares about you. That makes him vulnerable. Think carefully about whether you want to be responsible for what happens next. E.M. Elena. Somehow Dante's sister had gotten her number and was trying one last time to create doubt. Naomi deleted the message without responding and moved closer to Roman, feeling his arm tighten around her reflexively even in sleep. She must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, Marco was shaking her shoulder gently. It's time. Dante's people are moving on the Burlington house. Roman was already awake, already rolling out of bed and reaching for his jacket. The vulnerability from an hour ago was gone, replaced by cold focus. How many? 4 in the van, plus Dante himself following in a separate vehicle. Marco handed Roman a radio and a weapon that made Naomi's stomach turn. He's coming personally, just like you predicted. Because he can't resist. Roman checked the gun with practiced efficiency and holstered it. He wants to be there when they grab her, wants to see my face when he delivers the ultimatum. His ego is going to be his downfall. Naomi stood up, her heart racing. What do you need me to do? Stay here. Roman turned to her, his expression softening slightly. Tommy will stay with you. If anything goes wrong, if you don't hear from me within 3 hours, he has instructions to get you out of Vermont and disappear you somewhere Dante will never find you. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I'm not running. If this goes wrong, we figure out the next move together. Naomi, together, she repeated firmly. That's the deal, Roman. You don't get to sacrifice yourself dramatically while I hide in the background. We're in this now, which means we face whatever comes as a team. Something like pride flickered across his face. You're impossible. You're one to talk. She grabbed his jacket and pulled him down for a hard kiss. Be smart. Be careful. Come back to me. Always. He rested his forehead against hers for a brief moment. This ends tonight, one way or another, and when it's over, we're going to have a long conversation about what comes next. I'm holding you to that? Naomi released him reluctantly. Now go, before I change my mind about letting you walk out that door. Roman and his team left in a convoy of dark vehicles, leaving Naomi alone with Tommy and one other guard. The young man looked uncomfortable with his babysitting assignment, his eyes darting between his laptop screens and the windows. How long have you worked for Roman? Naomi asked, needing to fill the silence. 3 years, started when I was 17 doing IT work for his legitimate businesses. He found out I was good with computers and security systems, offered me a real position. Tommy's fingers flew across his keyboard. Most bosses wouldn't have given me a chance. Roman did. He has a habit of picking up strays, Naomi murmured. Yeah, well, some of us strays appreciate it. Tommy pulled up a new screen showing thermal imaging of the Burlington house. They're in position. Our people are hidden in the surrounding buildings. Dante's people are approaching the house. Should be any minute now. Naomi moved closer to look at the screen, her heart in her throat. She could see the heat signatures moving toward the house. 4 people advancing while 2 stayed with the vehicles. The trap was set. Now they just had to see if Dante would spring it. The assault on the fake safe house happened fast. Dante's people breached the front door with professional efficiency, their movements coordinated and practiced. They swept through the house room by room, and Naomi could hear their confusion even through the audio feed as they realized no one was there. It's empty, one of them reported. No sign of the target. This is a trap. Dante's voice came through crystal clear, cold with fury. Get out, now. But Roman's people were already moving. The thermal imaging showed figures emerging from hiding spots surrounding the house. Gunfire erupted, short, controlled bursts that spoke to professional discipline rather than panic. Within 90 seconds, it was over. Tommy was speaking rapidly into his radio, getting updates. 4 hostiles in custody, no casualties on our side. Dante's vehicle is trying to flee, but he paused, listening. Boss cut him off. They've got him boxed in. Naomi's hands were shaking. Is Roman okay? Boss is fine. Tommy frowned at his screen. He's approaching Dante's vehicle. I think he's going to talk to him. Let me hear. Naomi grabbed the radio from Tommy's hand before he could protest. She could hear car doors opening, footsteps, and then Roman's voice. Dante, step out of the vehicle. Go to hell, Varela. Dante sounded more annoyed than frightened. You think this changes anything? You think catching me in your little trap gives you leverage? I think it proves you're not as smart as you believe. Roman's voice was cold. You walked into this with your eyes open because you couldn't resist the chance to hurt me. That makes you predictable, and predictability gets you killed in our world. There was a long silence. Then Dante laughed. So kill me. Right here, right now. Put a bullet in my head and deal with the war that comes next. My family will burn your empire to ash, and everyone you care about will die screaming. That's where you're wrong. Roman's tone didn't change. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to do something much worse. I'm going to let you live with the knowledge that you failed, that you came after Naomi Hart and couldn't touch her, that your reputation as the unpredictable, dangerous Dante Morello just got shattered by a trap so obvious your own people should have seen it coming. You think humiliation is worse than death? Dante's voice dripped with contempt. You've gone soft, Varela. No, I've gotten smarter about what actually hurts people like you. The sound of footsteps suggested Roman was circling Dante's vehicle. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to get back in your car and drive back to Jersey. You're going to tell your family that you tried to move on my territory and I stopped you cold. And you're going to accept that Naomi Hart is permanently off limits, not just to you, but to anyone who works for you or does business with you. And if I refuse, then I stop playing civilized. Roman's voice dropped to something lethal. I've built my reputation on being controlled, on following the unwritten rules of our world. But you made this personal when you went after her. So if you refuse, I'll show you what happens when I stop caring about rules. I'll dismantle your operations piece by piece. I'll turn your own people against you. I'll make you watch everything you've built crumble before I finally let you die." The silence that followed was electric. Naomi could barely breathe, listening to Roman threaten a man with systematic destruction in the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. "You're bluffing," Dante said finally, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "Try me." 2 words, flat and absolute. "Touch her again. Touch anyone in that town. And find out exactly how far I'm willing to go." More silence. Then, "Fine. She's off limits. But this isn't over, Varela. Sooner or later, you're going to make a mistake. And when you do, I'll be waiting." "I'm counting on it." Roman's footsteps moved away from the vehicle. "Now get out of my sight before I change my mind about letting you walk." An engine started and Naomi heard the squeal of tires as Dante's vehicle sped away. Then Roman's voice came through the radio, directed at his team. "Make sure he actually leaves Vermont. I want confirmation that he's crossed state lines before anyone stands down." "Copy that, boss." The radio went quiet. Naomi stood there holding it, her entire body shaking with reaction. It was over. Dante had backed down. Roman had won without firing a shot, without spilling blood, using nothing but strategy and the reputation he'd built over 20 years. Tommy was grinning at his laptop. "That was incredible. Did you hear how Boss just completely dismantled him psychologically? Dante came here thinking he was going to leverage you into making the boss surrender, and instead he got played so hard he doesn't even realize the full extent of it yet." "What do you mean?" Naomi asked. "Dante's going to go back to Jersey and tell his people he lost this round. But he's going to frame it as a temporary setback, keep pushing to expand into Boss's territory through other means. What he doesn't know is that Boss has been documenting every illegal move Dante's made for the past 6 months. The moment Dante tries something new, Boss is going to drop all that evidence on Dante's own family, prove that Dante's been reckless, dangerous, bad for business. They'll remove Dante themselves before Boss has to do it." Naomi stared at the young man. "Roman planned for all of this? Even the aftermath? Boss always has 5 plans running simultaneously. It's kind of terrifying, honestly." Tommy's radio crackled with another update. "They're heading back. ETA 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Naomi paced the farmhouse, unable to sit still, her mind replaying the confrontation she'd heard. Roman had been cold, controlled, absolutely certain in his threats. But underneath that control, she'd heard something else. Barely leashed fury at the man who dared to threaten her. When the vehicles finally pulled up outside, Naomi was at the door before they'd fully stopped. Roman emerged from the lead SUV looking tired but unharmed, and she was moving before she could think, throwing herself into his arms hard enough to make him stumble. "Easy," he said, but his arms came around her tight, lifting her slightly off the ground. "I'm okay. We're okay." "You threatened to psychologically torture him." Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. I don't even know what that was. That was me making sure he understands the cost of coming after you." Roman set her down but didn't let go. "I meant every word, Naomi. If he'd refused to back down, I would have done exactly what I promised." She pulled back enough to look at his face. "I know. That's what scares me." "Good. You should be scared of what I'm capable of when it comes to protecting you." His expression was serious. "But you should also know that I'm never going to use that capability against you. Never going to try to control you or manipulate you or make you afraid of me. Can you live with that distinction?" Naomi thought about it. Really thought about it. Roman was offering her honesty about his darkness, while promising to keep that darkness pointed away from her. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't clean or simple or morally uncomplicated, but it was real. And after 20 years of waiting for something that felt true, she'd take real over perfect any day. "Yeah," she said quietly, "I can live with that." His smile was exhausted relief. "Thank God. Because I don't know what I would have done if you'd said no." Marco cleared his throat from behind them. "Boss, we need to debrief, and we need to decide what to do with Dante's people we have in custody." "Let them go." Roman didn't look away from Naomi. "Send them back to Jersey with a message. Anyone who works for Dante and wants to switch sides has 48 hours to make contact. After that, they're considered loyal to Dante and will be treated accordingly. You're trying to steal his people? Naomi asked. I'm offering them an exit from a boss who just proved he's willing to sacrifice them for a personal vendetta. Some will stay loyal, but some will see the opportunity to work for someone more stable. Roman finally released her and turned to his team. Get it done. And someone find out how Elena got Naomi's phone number. That's a security breach we need to close. The team dispersed efficiently, leaving Naomi and Roman alone on the farmhouse porch. The sun was setting, painting the Vermont sky in shades of orange and red. It should have been beautiful, but all Naomi could think about was how different the world looked now than it had a week ago. What happens next? She asked quietly. Roman leaned against the porch railing, his exhaustion finally showing. Next, I keep my promise to you. I start dismantling the parts of my empire that require violence to maintain. Keep the legitimate businesses, cut away everything that's purely criminal. It'll take time. You can't just walk away from this world overnight without making enemies. But I can transition, slowly, carefully. You do that? Give up everything you built? Not everything, just the parts that are incompatible with the life I want. He reached out and took her hand. I spent 20 years building power, and all it's brought me is isolation and enemies and a constant state of war. If there's a chance, even a small one, to build something different with you, then yeah, I'll do whatever it takes. Naomi squeezed his hand. I'm not asking you to give up who you are. Just maybe find a version of yourself that doesn't require quite so many armed guards and death threats. I can work with that. Roman pulled her closer, wrapping an arm around her waist. But fair warning, even if I go completely legitimate, I'm always going to have enemies. People I put in prison or ruined financially or scared badly enough that they'll hold grudges. Your life is never going to be completely normal if you're with me. Normal is overrated. Naomi leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of his body. I spent 10 years building a normal life, and you know what? It was safe and boring and lonely. Maybe I'm ready for complicated instead. Complicated I can definitely provide. His laugh was rough. Fair trade. I'll work on becoming less dangerous. You work on accepting that danger is always going to be part of the package. We'll meet somewhere in the middle. Deal. She turned in his arms to face him. But I have conditions. No more secret plans that involve using me as theoretical bait. No more making decisions about my safety without consulting me. And no more disappearing for 20 years because you think I'm better off without you. Roman cupped her face with both hands, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. I can't promise I won't want to protect you. It's hardwired into who I am at this point. But I can promise to include you in the decision-making, to trust you to know your own mind. And I swear to you, Naomi, I will never leave again. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Together, she echoed, and kissed him as the sun set over the Vermont woods. They stayed at the farmhouse for 2 more days while Roman's people confirmed that Dante had actually backed down and returned to New Jersey. The intelligence came in steady. Dante's operation was in chaos. 3 of his senior people had already reached out about switching allegiances, and his family was asking pointed questions about his failed Vermont venture. He's wounded, Marco reported during a morning briefing. Not fatally, but enough that he's going to be focused on internal damage control for the next few months. We should have a clear window to make our moves. Roman nodded, studying the reports spread across the farmhouse table. Start reaching out to our contacts in the legitimate business world. I want to know which of our operations can be transitioned to fully legal enterprises and which ones need to be shut down entirely. Boss, if you liquidate too much too fast, people are going to think you're weak, that you're abandoning the life because Dante scared you. Marco looked uncomfortable delivering the warning. It could trigger moves against you from other players who see an opportunity. Let them try. Roman's voice was flat. Anyone who wants to test me can join Dante in learning exactly how far I'm willing to go. The difference is that I'm choosing to walk away from this life, not being forced out of it. There's a distinction. Still risky. Everything worth doing is risky. Roman glanced at Naomi, who was listening from the kitchen doorway. But staying in this world, staying the man I've been for 20 years, that's a risk I'm not willing to take anymore. So we do this smart, We do it carefully, but we do it. The team looked skeptical but nodded acceptance. They'd follow Roman's lead even if they didn't understand his reasoning. That was the loyalty he'd built over the years, the respect he'd earned through consistent leadership and protecting his people. Later that afternoon, Naomi and Roman walked through the woods behind the farmhouse. The November air was cold enough to sting, but the sun was out and the bare trees were beautiful in their starkness. It felt like the first moment of peace they'd had since Roman had driven back into her life. "Tell me about the quarry," Naomi said quietly. "The place you mentioned as a potential meeting point with Dante. You said it was tied to your childhood." Roman was quiet for a long moment, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. "It was where Jimmy DeLuca used to take me when he wanted to beat me somewhere no one could hear me scream. Old abandoned granite quarry about 5 miles from the DeLuca house. He'd drive me there, do his damage, and leave me to walk back." The casual way he described it made Naomi's stomach turn. "How old were you?" 12 when it started, lasted until I aged out and ran." Roman's hands were in his pockets, his shoulders tense despite the neutral tone. "I thought about burning that place down 100 times over the years. Thought about confronting Jimmy, making him pay for what he did. But Salvatore taught me that revenge is expensive and rarely worth the cost." "Did you ever see him again, Jimmy?" "Once. About 10 years ago, he was working construction in Queens, living in a crappy studio apartment, drinking himself to death slowly. I stood outside his building for 2 hours trying to decide if I wanted to go up there, wanted to make him look at what I'd become despite everything he'd done to break me." Roman stopped walking, staring into the bare trees. "In the end, I just left. He was already punishing himself better than I ever could, living small and scared and alone. That felt like justice enough." Naomi took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm sorry you went through that. Sorry that no one protected you. I survived. That's more than a lot of kids in our situation can say." He squeezed her hand. "But yeah, the quarry represents a lot of ugly memories. That's why I wanted Dante to meet me there if it came to a confrontation. Wanted to take that place back, turn it from a symbol of my powerlessness into proof that I'd won. That I'd survived and built something and could protect the people I loved." "You did build something," Naomi said softly. "Maybe not the empire Salvatore imagined, but something. You built loyalty and respect and a reputation that made Dante back down without bloodshed. That counts for something. It counts for staying alive long enough to try being someone different." Roman turned to face her fully. "That's what I want, Naomi. A chance to be someone who isn't defined by violence and fear. Someone who can stand next to you without bringing danger into your world every day." "You're already that person." She moved closer, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. "You're just buried under 20 years of armor. We'll find him together, okay? The boy from the bridge and the man you became. Figure out how they can both exist." Roman pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against the cold. "I don't deserve you. Don't deserve a second chance, or your forgiveness, or any of this, but I'm going to spend whatever time you give me trying to earn it. Stop talking about deserving things." Naomi's voice was muffled against his jacket. "We both survived terrible things. We both built lives from broken pieces, and now we get to decide what comes next. Not based on what we deserve, but on what we choose. And I choose this. I choose you." She felt him shudder, emotion breaking through his control. "I choose you too. Every time, in every life, I'd still choose you." They stood there in the cold woods holding each other as the sun started to set. Two damaged people who'd found their way back to each other after 20 years of separation. It wasn't clean, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that was enough. That evening, Roman got a call that changed everything. Naomi watched his expression shift from neutral to grim as he listened, his hand tightening on his phone. "When?" A pause. "How many casualties?" Another pause, longer this time. "Understood. Increase security on all our legitimate operations. I want eyes on every property, every business, every person associated with us. And find out who gave the order." He hung up and stood there for a moment, his back to Naomi, tension radiating from every line of his body. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "One of my warehouses in Brooklyn just got hit. Not by Dante, someone else entirely. They knew exactly where our security gaps were, exactly what to target for maximum damage. Roman turned to face her. I have a traitor. Probably someone close. Someone who's been feeding information to my enemies for months. I thought you'd been testing people, feeding false information to find the leak. I was, but whoever this is has been smart enough to avoid every trap I've set. His jaw was tight, which means they're patient, disciplined, and have access to information they shouldn't have. That's a very short list of people. Marco burst into the room, his expression urgent. Boss, we need to talk. I've been running analytics on the attack patterns, and I think I know who... He stopped, glancing at Naomi. It should probably be private. She stays, Roman said immediately. We're done with secrets. Whatever you have to say it in front of her. Marco hesitated, then nodded. Okay. The hit on the warehouse was coordinated with inside knowledge of our patrol schedules, security codes, and inventory location. Only 5 people have access to all 3 of those data points. You, me, Anthony, Sophia, and... He stopped, his face going pale. And Tommy. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Tommy, the kid Roman had taken in 3 years ago. Tommy, who'd been watching over Naomi while the Dante situation played out. Tommy, who'd seemed so earnest and loyal. No, Naomi said immediately. That doesn't make sense. He was helping you. He was running surveillance, coordinating, the perfect position to feed intel to our enemies while looking completely loyal. Roman's voice was hollow, and I handed it to him, gave him access to everything because I saw a scared kid and wanted to help. He turned to Marco. Where is he now? At the Burlington safe house with the tech equipment. He said he wanted to do a final systems check before we shut the location down. Roman was already moving, grabbing his jacket and weapon. Get everyone mobilized. If Tommy's there, we lock the location down and bring him in for questioning. If he's already run, we track him down before he can do any more damage. Roman, wait! Naomi grabbed his arm. What if you're wrong? What if it's not Tommy? Then he'll be cleared and released with my apologies and a bonus. Roman's expression was cold fury barely contained. But if I'm right, if that kid betrayed me after everything I did for him, then he's going to learn exactly what happens to traitors in my world. The drive to Burlington was tense and silent. Naomi sat in the back of Roman's SUV, watching him coordinate his team via radio and phone. Marco was in the passenger seat, weapons laid out and ready. The professional efficiency of it all was terrifying. They arrived at the safe house to find it dark and quiet. Too quiet. Roman's team surrounded the building, cutting off all exits before Roman and Marco entered with Naomi staying in the vehicle under guard. She watched through the SUV window, her heart pounding, saw lights come on inside the house, heard muffled voices raised in anger, then a single gunshot that made her flinch violently. The next 30 seconds were chaos. More gunfire, shouting, and then Roman emerged from the house half carrying Marco, who was bleeding from his shoulder. Tommy came out behind them, hands zip-tied behind his back, his face a mask of teenage defiance. Naomi was out of the SUV before her guard could stop her, running to Roman. What happened? Is Marco... He'll live. Kevlar stopped most of it, just a graze on the shoulder. Roman handed Marco off to another team member and turned his attention to Tommy. Start talking. Who are you working for? Go to hell! Tommy's voice cracked, teenage bravado covering terror. You think you're some kind of hero because you took me in? You're just another criminal. You don't get to act betrayed when people use you the same way you use everyone else. Roman's hand shot out, gripping the kid's jacket and slamming him against the SUV. I gave you a job, gave you purpose and protection and a chance to build something. And you sold me out for what? Money? Revenge? What was worth betraying everyone who trusted you? Freedom. Tommy spat the word. You think you rescued me, but all you did was trap me in your world. Made me dependent on you, made it impossible to leave without becoming a target. So yeah, when someone offered me a way out, real money and a clean break, I took it. Who offered? Roman's voice was deadly quiet. Tommy smiled, blood on his teeth from where he'd bitten his lip. You'll find out soon enough. They're coming for you, Roman. And when they do, that girl you're so desperate to protect, she's going to be the first casualty. Roman's fist connected with Tommy's jaw, dropping the kid to the ground. You don't get to threaten her. Whatever else you've done, whatever deal you made, you leave Naomi out of it. Too late. Tommy laughed from the ground, the sound slightly hysterical. She's already part of it. The moment you brought her into your world, you painted a target on her back. And unlike Dante, the people I'm working for won't be scared off by your reputation. They're going to take everything from you piece by piece and make you watch. Naomi felt ice flood her veins. This wasn't over. Dante had been handled, but there was someone else, someone patient enough to turn a kid against Roman over the course of years, someone with resources and planning and clear intent to destroy everything Roman had built. Roman seemed to realize it at the same moment. He looked up at Marco, who was being bandaged by another team member. Get him secured, find out everything he knows, who recruited him, what he's told them, what moves they're planning. Use whatever methods necessary. Boss, Marco started, I don't care about legal or ethical lines right now. Roman's voice was cold steel. We have an enemy who's been playing the long game, and they just announced they're coming after Naomi directly, so we get answers. Now. Naomi followed Roman back to the farmhouse in stunned silence, her mind replaying Tommy's words on an endless loop. The kid was barely 20, but the hatred in his eyes had been ancient, carved deep by whatever promises Roman's unknown enemy had made. She kept seeing the moment Roman's fist had connected with Tommy's jaw, the cold fury that had transformed him from the man who'd held her in the woods into something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Marco was being treated by a doctor Roman kept on retainer. No hospitals, no police reports, nothing that would create an official record. The bullet had grazed his shoulder badly enough to require stitches, but hadn't hit anything vital. He sat shirtless in the farmhouse kitchen while the doctor worked, his face pale but determined. I should have seen it, Marco said as Roman paced the room. Tommy had access to everything. I vouched for him when you brought him in. This is on me. It's on me. Roman's voice was flat. I'm the one who saw a scared kid and got sentimental. Thought I could save him the way Salvatore saved me. Turns out not everyone wants to be saved. Or someone got to him before you could, Naomi offered quietly from the doorway. He said they offered him freedom. That sounds like someone who knew exactly what buttons to push. Exactly what a kid trapped in your world would be desperate for. Roman stopped pacing and looked at her. You're defending him? I'm saying that whoever recruited Tommy knew what they were doing. They didn't just bribe a random employee. They targeted someone young enough to manipulate, someone you'd trusted, someone positioned to do maximum damage. She moved into the room, crossing her arms. That takes planning, patience, resources. This isn't some opportunistic play. Whoever's behind this has been setting it up for years. The doctor finished with Marco and packed up his supplies. Keep it clean, change the dressing daily, take the antibiotics, you'll be fine in a few weeks. Thanks, Doc. Marco stood carefully, testing his range of motion. Boss, we need to make Tommy talk. Find out who recruited him, what else they know, what their endgame is. Already being handled. Roman's phone buzzed and he glanced at the screen. Sophia's running the interrogation. If Tommy knows anything useful, she'll get it out of him. Naomi felt her stomach turn. What does that mean exactly? Get it out of him? It means Sophia is very good at making people understand that cooperation is in their best interest. Roman's expression was carefully neutral. She won't kill him, won't cause permanent damage, but she will make him uncomfortable enough to talk. You're torturing a 20-year-old kid. The words came out flat. I'm extracting information from a traitor who threatened your life and shot one of my best people. Roman's voice hardened. There's a difference. Is there? Naomi held his gaze. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're justifying violence because you're scared and angry. And I get it, Roman. I understand why you're furious. But torturing Tommy isn't going to make you safer. It's just going to make you into exactly what he accused you of being. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marco made a diplomatic retreat, muttering something about checking security protocols. The doctor had already disappeared. It was just Naomi and Roman, the space between them crackling with tension. What would you have me do? Roman's voice was low and dangerous. Tommy sold us out to an enemy we can't see, an enemy who apparently has the resources to turn my own people against me. He shot Marco. He threatened you directly. And you want me to what? Ask him nicely to share information? I want you to think about who you're trying to become. Naomi didn't back down. You told me you wanted to walk away from the violence, to be someone different. But the first time things get complicated, you're right back to ordering torture. So which is it, Roman? Are you actually trying to change, or were you just telling me what I wanted to hear? His jaw worked, fury and shame warring on his face. It's not that simple. It never is. But you still have to choose. She moved closer, her voice softening slightly. I'm not naive enough to think you can just walk away from this world without consequences. I know there are things you'll have to do that I won't like, decisions you'll make that I'll struggle with. But Tommy's a kid, a scared, manipulated kid who made terrible choices because someone convinced him those were his only options. If you torture him, you prove him right. You prove that you're exactly the monster he thinks you are. Roman's hands were shaking. She could see the effort it took for him to unclench his fists, to pull back from the edge of violence that had kept him alive for 20 years. He shot Marco, threatened you, betrayed everything I know. Naomi cut him off. And he should face consequences. But consequences that let you sleep at night, Roman. Consequences that don't turn you into something I can't recognize. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. Sophia, stop the interrogation. Keep Tommy secured but unharmed. We'll try a different approach. A pause. I don't care if you think it's a mistake. Do it anyway. He hung up and looked at Naomi with an expression she couldn't quite read. Happy? Not particularly, but at least you're still someone I recognize. She closed the distance between them and took his hand. This is going to be hard. Figuring out who you are when you're not operating from a place of fear and control. But I'm here, okay? We'll figure it out together. Roman pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight it was almost painful. I don't know how to be vulnerable. Don't know how to make decisions based on what's right instead of what keeps me alive. Salvatore taught me to be ruthless, to eliminate threats before they could become problems. And now you're asking me to be something I've never been. Not asking you to be something you've never been, Naomi corrected, her voice muffled against his chest. Asking you to remember who you were before survival required ruthlessness. The boy on the bridge who talked me out of giving up. Who saw someone struggling and chose kindness even though kindness had never been shown to him. That person is still in there, Roman. He's just buried under 20 years of armor. What if I can't find him? The vulnerability in the question made her heart ache. What if I've been this version of myself for so long that there's nothing else left? Then we build something new together. Naomi pulled back enough to look at his face. Not the boy you were, or the crime boss you became, but someone in between. Someone who understands violence but chooses not to use it. Someone who's strong enough to protect people without becoming what he's protecting them from. Roman's laugh was broken. You're asking for a miracle. I'm asking for effort, that's all. Just try, Roman. Try to be someone you can be proud of instead of someone you're just used to being. His phone buzzed before he could respond. He glanced at it and his expression went grim. Sophia found something. We need to go. They drove to one of Roman's legitimate businesses, an import-export company that fronted for less legal operations. Sophia was waiting in a back office, her severe gray hair pulled tight, her expression serious. Tommy sat in a chair across from her, hands still zip-tied, looking exhausted but unharmed. I didn't touch him, Sophia said immediately, looking at Roman. Like you ordered, but I did ask questions and eventually he started answering them. I think you're going to want to hear this. Roman gestured for her to continue. Sophia pulled out a tablet and brought up a series of financial records. Tommy's been receiving payments for 3 years, small amounts at first, a few hundred here and there, but over time they increased. Last month alone, he received $15,000 split across multiple anonymous transfers. She swiped to show bank statements. The money's clean, laundered through so many shell corporations that tracing it back to the source would take months. But Tommy says the payments came with instructions. Information to gather, security protocols to document, schedules to track. Who was giving the instructions? Roman asked. Sophia looked at Tommy, who was staring at the floor. Tell him. I never met them in person. Tommy's voice was hoarse. Everything was electronic, encrypted messages, anonymous drops. But they knew things. Things about the boss, about his operation, about Salvatore. Things you'd only know if you'd been close to the family. Roman went very still. You're saying this is someone from inside Salvatore's old organization. I'm saying it's someone who knew Salvatore well enough to know which kid he'd taken in, which operations he'd left you in his will, and exactly how to destabilize what you built. Tommy finally looked up, and there was something like regret in his eyes. They told me you stole everything from the rightful heir, that Salvatore's family deserved his empire, not some random stray he picked up. They made it sound like I was helping correct an injustice. Dante. The name came out of Roman like a curse. This whole time, I thought he was the obvious threat. The loud, aggressive nephew who wanted his inheritance back. But Dante was never the real player, was he? Sophia shook her head. I don't think so. Dante's moves have been too obvious, too aggressive. This kind of long-term infiltration, the patience it requires, that's not Dante's style. Then who? Naomi asked. Roman was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. Elena. It was always Elena. Dante's older sister, the one everyone dismissed because she was a woman in a male-dominated world. The one who smiled and played the gracious negotiator while her brother made noise and drew attention. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Elena's visit to the bookstore hadn't been a random intimidation tactic. It had been reconnaissance, getting a close look at Naomi, assessing her as a potential weakness, maybe even planting tracking software through that brief moment when Naomi's phone had been on the counter. She's been playing both sides, Naomi said slowly, encouraging Dante to be aggressive and obvious while she worked quietly in the background to destabilize your operation from within. When Dante failed, everyone would assume the threat was handled, but Elena would still have her pieces in place. And now that Dante's back down, she's forced to move faster than she planned. Roman looked at Tommy. The warehouse hit tonight. That was supposed to be coordinated with something else, wasn't it? Part of a larger plan. Tommy hesitated, then nodded. They were supposed to hit 3 locations simultaneously. The warehouse, your offices in Manhattan, and... He stopped, his face going pale. And what? Roman's voice was deadly quiet. And the bookstore. They were supposed to grab Naomi tonight, use her to force you to surrender everything. Tommy's words came out in a rush. But something went wrong with their timing. The warehouse team moved early, and the other 2 teams had to abort. That's why I ran. I knew once you realized what was happening, you'd figure out it was me. Naomi felt the floor drop out from under her. She'd been moments away from being kidnapped. If the warehouse team hadn't jumped the gun, if Roman's people hadn't caught Tommy when they did, she'd be in Elena's hands right now. Roman's expression had gone absolutely cold. How many people does Elena have positioned in my organization? I don't know. I only know my own assignments, but she said there were others. Tommy slumped in his chair. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now, but I didn't understand what I was really helping with until it was too late. By then, they had enough on me that I couldn't get out without ending up dead or in prison. You could have come to me. Roman's voice was hard but not cruel. I would have protected you. That's what they said you'd say. Said you'd promise protection and then feed me to your enemies the moment it was convenient. Tommy looked up, and there were tears in his eyes now. I was 17 when they recruited me. I didn't know better. I just knew that someone was offering me money and a way out, and that sounded better than spending my life watching my back in your world. The silence that followed was heavy. Naomi could see Roman struggling with his response, trying to balance his fury at the betrayal with the understanding that Tommy had been manipulated by someone who specialized in exploiting vulnerable people. Sophia, get him transferred to a secure location, not a cell, an apartment, somewhere comfortable but controlled. Roman's voice was tired. Postguards. Make sure he can't run or communicate with Elena, but treat him like a witness under protection, not a prisoner. Sophia's eyebrows rose. Boss, he shot Marco. He sold you out for 3 years. And you're putting him in an apartment? He's a kid who got played by someone much smarter and more ruthless. Roman looked at Tommy. And if we're going to have any chance of beating Elena, we need him to tell us everything he knows. That works better if he's not terrified we're going to kill him. Tommy stared at Roman like he couldn't quite believe what he was hearing. Why are you being decent to me, after everything I did? Because someone was decent to me once, when I didn't deserve it, and it changed my life. Roman stood, gesturing for Sophia to handle the transfer. Don't make me regret giving you the same chance. Back in the SUV, Naomi watched Roman's profile as he drove. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the wheel with controlled tension. He'd made the right call with Tommy. She knew that. Could see it in the way his shoulders had relaxed fractionally when he'd given the order for protection instead of punishment. But it had cost him something, cost him the easy certainty of responding to betrayal with violence. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing to be someone I can respect. I know it wasn't easy." Roman's laugh was bitter. "It was the hardest decision I've made in years. Every instinct I have was screaming to make an example of him, to show anyone else thinking about betraying me exactly what happens. But you were right. Torturing Tommy wouldn't have made us safer. It just would have proven Elena right, that I'm a thug who solves problems with violence. So what's the plan now? Elena knows we're onto her. She'll accelerate whatever she's planning, which is exactly what I want her to do." Roman's expression shifted to something calculating. Elena's strength has always been patience and planning. She's had 3 years to position pieces, build networks, create scenarios. But now we've disrupted her timeline by catching Tommy. She's going to have to move faster than she planned, make decisions without full information. That's when people make mistakes. "Yeah, you're going to force her into a confrontation." Naomi understood immediately. "Make her think she's losing control so she'll come at you directly instead of working through proxies." "Exactly. And when she does, I'll be ready." Roman glanced at her. "But I need you somewhere safe first. Somewhere Elena can't reach, even if she has other people embedded in my organization." "Where could possibly be safer than surrounded by your security team?" "The one place Elena would never look because it's too obvious, too sentimental." Roman's hands tightened on the wheel. "The quarry. The place from my childhood that I told you about. It's isolated, defensible, and no one except Marco and Sophia know it has any significance to me." Naomi thought about the abandoned quarry where Jimmy DeLuca had beaten a scared 12-year-old boy, the place Roman had wanted to reclaim by confronting Dante there. "You want to turn your worst memories into a fortress?" "I want to take something that represented my powerlessness and make it represent my strength. Seems fitting." His voice was quiet. "And I want you there because it's the one location I can secure completely without relying on anyone who might be compromised. Just me, Marco, and maybe 2 others I trust absolutely. Small team, no weak points." "When do we leave?" "Tonight, before Elena realizes we've moved you." Roman pulled out his phone and made a series of rapid calls, coordinating with his team. "Marco, get medical clearance from the doctor and meet me at the original location. Sophia, I need full backgrounds on everyone who's had access to our security protocols in the last year. And get me a list of properties Elena owns or has connections to. I want to know where she might be operating from." The preparations took 2 hours. Naomi packed a bag at the farmhouse while Roman's people swept the quarry location and set up basic infrastructure: generators, security cameras, communication equipment. Marco showed up looking pale but determined, his shoulder heavily bandaged but functional. "You should be resting," Naomi told him as they loaded into separate vehicles for the convoy. "I'll rest when Elena's handled." Marco's jaw was set. "She's been playing us for years. I want to be there when the boss takes her down." The drive to the quarry took them deep into Vermont's backwoods, down roads that got progressively worse until they were barely more than dirt tracks. The quarry itself was exactly as grim as Naomi had imagined, a vast pit carved into granite hillside, surrounded by rusted chain-link fencing and warning signs about unstable ground. Roman's people had set up a command center in what had once been the quarry office, a cinder-block building that was surprisingly solid despite decades of neglect. They'd brought in portable heaters, set up laptops and monitors, established a secure perimeter with motion sensors and cameras. "It's not comfortable," Roman said as he showed Naomi inside, "but it's secure. Elena would need an army to breach this location, and armies attract attention. This gives us time to plan our next move." Naomi looked around the Spartan space. "How long are we staying here?" "However long it takes to draw Elena out." Roman pulled up a map on one of the monitors. "I'm going to start dismantling her network. Every person Tommy can identify, every shell corporation Sophia traces back to Elena, every piece of the infrastructure she's built. I'm going to systematically destroy it. And when she's desperate enough, angry enough, she'll come after me personally. That's when we end this." "And if she doesn't take the bait? If she just cuts her losses and disappears?" Roman's smile was cold. "Then I hunt her down. But Elena's not the type to walk away from an investment this big. She spent 3 years building toward taking over Salvatore's empire. She's not going to abandon that because of one setback." Over the next 3 days, Roman orchestrated a systematic campaign of destruction against Elena's operation. Working from the quarry command center, he and Sofia identified 12 people embedded in his organization who had connections to Elena's financial network. Some were approached directly and offered deals, immunity and protection in exchange for information. Others were quietly removed from positions of influence, their access to sensitive information cut off. The import company where Tommy had been questioned got raided by federal agents based on an anonymous tip. One Roman had carefully orchestrated to expose Elena's money laundering operation without blowing back on his own businesses. 2 of Elena's shell corporations were frozen by the IRS after Sofia provided documentation of illegal activities. A warehouse Elena used for storing smuggled goods mysteriously caught fire, destroying millions in inventory. Naomi watched it all unfold with a mixture of awe and discomfort. Roman was methodical, precise, showing no emotion as he systematically dismantled 3 years of Elena's work, but she could see the toll it took, the tension headaches that left him squinting at screens. The nights he barely slept, checking security feeds and running scenarios, the way his hands shook slightly when he thought no one was watching. On the 4th night, she found him outside the command center, standing at the edge of the quarry pit and staring into the darkness below. The November cold had turned brutal, but he didn't seem to notice. "You should come inside," she said quietly, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "It's freezing out here." "This is where it happened, where Jimmy would bring me." Roman's voice was distant. "He'd make me stand right here, at the edge, and tell me how easy it would be to push me in, how no one would care if I just disappeared. And I believed him. For years I believed that my life didn't matter to anyone." Naomi moved closer, her hand finding his. "It mattered to me. Even when I thought you were gone, even when I tried to move on, it still mattered." "I know. That's why I'm going to end this here." He turned to face her, and in the dim light from the command center, his expression was determined. "Elena's going to come. Probably soon. Tommy's been feeding her false information suggesting we're vulnerable, that I've spread my resources too thin trying to dismantle her network. She'll see it as an opportunity." "You're using yourself as bait." Naomi's stomach clenched. "Roman, it's the only move she can't counter." He cupped her face with both hands. "I've taken away her money, her people, her infrastructure. The only thing she has left is her reputation as someone who's smarter than me, who can outplay me strategically. If I give her a chance to prove that, she'll take it. And when she does, I'll be ready." "What if you're wrong? What if she's already 10 steps ahead? Then I lose." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "But I'd rather lose fighting than spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when Elena's next move is coming. At least this way, it ends. One way or another." Naomi wanted to argue, wanted to find some alternative that didn't involve Roman deliberately putting himself in danger. But she'd learned enough about his world to understand that sometimes there were no good options, just bad ones and worse ones, and you chose the path that gave you the best chance of survival. "Okay," she said finally, "but I have one condition. When Elena comes, and I know you're right, she will come, you don't face her alone. You let your people help. You trust that Marco and Sofia and everyone else who's loyal to you will have your back." Roman's expression softened. "I can do that. And one more thing," Naomi pulled his face down to hers. "When this is over, when Elena's handled and the threat is gone, we're done with this life. Not slowly, not gradually, done. You sell off everything that's not legitimate, you cut ties with the criminal world, and we build something new, together. That's the deal." "That's the deal." He kissed her, deep and desperate and full of promises neither of them was certain he could keep. "I love you, Naomi. I should have said it 20 years ago on that bridge. Should have said it the night I came back. But I'm saying it now. Whatever happens, you need to know that." The words hit her like a physical force. She'd known, of course, had understood on some level that what existed between them went deeper than childhood friendship or rekindled attraction. But hearing him say it out loud, hearing the raw honesty in his voice, made it real in a way nothing else had. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. "Even though you're complicated and dangerous, and you've turned my entire life upside down, I love you anyway." They stood there at the edge of the quarry, holding each other against the cold, Two damaged people who'd found their way back together after 20 years. Tomorrow would bring Elena and confrontation and violence, but tonight they had this moment, and it had to be enough. The attack came at dawn. Naomi woke to the sound of alarms and gunfire, Roman already pulling on his jacket and grabbing weapons. Marco burst through the door of the small room they'd been sleeping in, his face grim. Elena's here, came in fast with at least a dozen people, breached the outer perimeter. We're locked down, but she's pushing hard. Roman was checking his gun with mechanical precision. Casualties? One of ours injured, not serious. We've held them at the second perimeter, but they're well equipped. Military-grade weapons, coordinated tactics. She brought professionals. Good. Roman's smile was sharp and dangerous. That means she's committed. No half measures, no room for retreat. This is her final play. Naomi grabbed his arm. What do you need me to do? Stay in the command center with Sophia. It's the most secure location. If something goes wrong, if we can't hold them, she has instructions to get you out through the back exit. Roman kissed her hard and fast. I love you. Remember that. Don't you dare. Naomi's voice shook. Don't you dare make this a goodbye. You're coming back, Roman. We have a deal. I'm coming back, he promised. And then he was gone, disappearing into the chaos with Marco at his side. Sophia appeared to escort Naomi to the command center, which had been reinforced with additional security measures overnight. Monitors showed the firefight happening at the quarry's perimeter. Roman's people dug in behind defensive positions, Elena's team pushing forward with professional aggression. How many does she have? Naomi asked, her eyes glued to the screens. 15 that we can count, maybe more in reserve. Sophia's fingers flew across keyboards, coordinating Roman's defensive response. But we have the advantage of position and preparation. Elena's operating on anger and desperation. That makes people sloppy. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes. Naomi watched Roman move through the firefight with controlled precision, directing his people, providing covering fire, slowly pushing Elena's team back. Marco was at his side, despite his injury, the two of them working in perfect synchronization. Then everything changed. A black town car pushed through the outer perimeter, ignoring the gunfire, and screeched to a halt in the middle of the quarry yard. The door opened and Elena Marchesi stepped out, immaculately dressed despite the chaos, a gun held loosely in one hand. Roman Varela, her voice carried across the quarry, amplified somehow. Let's stop playing with our employees and settle this ourselves. You and me, face to face. Sophia swore in Italian. Boss, don't. It's obviously a trap. But Roman was already lowering his weapon, stepping out from behind cover. Stand down, he ordered his team. Everyone hold position. Naomi's heart stopped. This was it. The confrontation Roman had been maneuvering toward for days. But seeing it happen, watching him walk into the open with nothing but his confidence and his gun, was terrifying in a way she hadn't anticipated. Elena smiled as Roman approached, her weapon aimed casually in his direction. You've caused me considerable inconvenience this week. You caused me 3 years of operational headaches, and nearly got someone I love killed. Roman's voice was cold. I'd say we're not even close to even. Love, Elena laughed. Salvatore warned me you had that weakness. Said you were sentimental underneath all the control. I didn't believe him until I saw how you reacted to threats against your little bookstore owner. Salvatore told you? Roman's expression shifted. When? Before he died. He knew his heart was failing, knew he had months at most. So he came to me, his oldest friend's daughter, and asked me to watch out for his empire after he was gone. Elena's smile was sharp. He said you'd inherited his operations, but that you weren't ready. Too young, too inexperienced, too vulnerable. He asked me to help guide you, to make sure Dante didn't tear everything apart. So you spent 3 years trying to destroy me? Roman's confusion was genuine. That's how you help someone? I spent 3 years testing you. Elena's gun hand remained steady. Every move I made, every pressure point I found, I was pushing you to see if you'd break. Salvatore said you had potential, but potential means nothing if you can't handle adversity. So I created adversity. Turned your own people against you, threatened what you loved, forced you to make impossible choices. And you know what? You passed. The words hung in the cold morning air. Naomi watched through the monitors in disbelief as Elena lowered her weapon entirely. This was all a test. Roman's voice was dangerous. You got Tommy killed. Tommy's not dead. Check with your people. I gave Sophia the code to call off the hit 2 hours ago. Elena gestured at the quarry. And my team out there? They're firing blanks. Well, mostly blanks. Had to make it convincing. But no one was ever meant to die here, Roman. This was about pushing you to the point where you'd either break or prove you were worthy of Salvatore's legacy. Roman stared at her for a long moment, then started laughing. It was harsh and broken and edged with hysteria. You put me through hell, put Naomi in danger, destabilized my entire operation, and it was all theater? It was all necessary. Elena finally holstered her weapon. Salvatore loved you like a son, but he knew the world we live in would test you in ways he couldn't prepare you for. So he asked me to be that test, to find your weaknesses and exploit them until you either collapsed or learned to defend them. You chose to defend them. You chose to protect the bookstore owner even when it would have been easier to let her go. You chose mercy with Tommy when violence would have been simpler. You're ready, Roman. Ready to actually lead this empire instead of just surviving in it. And if I'd failed your test, Roman's voice was very quiet, then I would have taken over Salvatore's operations myself, as was always his backup plan. Elena moved closer. But you didn't fail, you evolved. You're not the same man Salvatore left in charge 7 years ago. You're better, stronger, smart enough to know when violence is necessary and when it's just habit. Naomi watched Roman's face cycle through emotions, fury, disbelief, grudging understanding. Finally, he shook his head. I should kill you for this. But you won't, because you've learned that killing me would just create more problems than it solves. Elena smiled. See, you really have grown. Get out of my sight. Roman's voice was steel. Take your people and leave. And if you ever come near Naomi again, test or no test, I will forget everything I've learned and revert to the man who solves problems with bullets. Elena inclined her head in acknowledgement and turned to leave. Then she paused and looked back. Salvatore would be proud of you, for what it's worth. It's worth nothing. Roman's hands were clenched into fists. But tell Dante his sister's crazy, and he should probably keep better control of his family. Dante has no idea I did any of this, and he never will. Elena climbed back into her town car. Congratulations on passing your final exam, Roman. Try not to waste what you've learned. The car drove away, and gradually Elena's team withdrew as well. Within 20 minutes, the quarry was quiet again, the only evidence of the battle being scattered shell casings and the aftermath of what Naomi now understood had been mostly a very elaborate performance. Roman stood in the middle of the quarry yard, alone, his shoulders shaking. Naomi couldn't tell if he was laughing or crying or both. Naomi ran from the command center before Sophia could stop her, her feet pounding across the quarry yard until she reached Roman. He was still standing there, motionless, staring at the space where Elena's car had disappeared. When she touched his arm, he flinched like she'd burned him. Roman? 3 years. His voice was hollow. 3 years of looking over my shoulder, 3 years of paranoia and contingency plans, and wondering who I could trust. And it was all a test, a performance. Salvatore's final lesson from beyond the grave. You didn't know. Naomi moved in front of him, forcing him to look at her. How could you have known? Elena played it perfectly, made it look real enough that everyone believed it. Tommy believed it. He thought he was betraying me for money and freedom, thought I was the monster Elena painted me as. How many others did she manipulate? How many people made choices based on her lies? Roman's hands were shaking now, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. And the worst part is that she's right. I did pass her test. I did become someone who could handle the pressure. But I had to drag you into it, had to put you in danger, had to become exactly the kind of person who solves problems by threatening systematic destruction. You also became the kind of person who showed mercy to a kid who shot your best friend. Naomi took his face in her hands. You chose not to torture Tommy. You chose to protect me instead of using me as bait. You chose to try being better even when it would have been easier to be worse. That counts for something, Roman. Does it? His eyes were desperate. Because I still threatened Elena with violence, still built my entire defense on fear and reputation, still operated from a place of control instead of trust. Yeah, you did. Naomi didn't sugarcoat it. But you're also standing here questioning those choices instead of celebrating that you won. That's growth. That's the boy from the bridge fighting his way back to the surface. Marco approached carefully, his injured shoulder making his movements stiff. Boss, we need to debrief, and someone needs to check on Tommy. If Elena was telling the truth about calling off the hit, he might still be alive. Roman straightened, pulling himself together through visible effort. Where is he? Last I heard, still in the apartment we set him up in. Sophia's people have been maintaining the guard rotation. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. What do you want to do with him? Roman stopped, his jaw working. I want to ask him if he knew. If Elena told him it was all theater, or if he really believed he was betraying me. They drove back to Burlington in convoy, the morning sun turning the November landscape into stark beauty. Naomi sat next to Roman in the SUV, watching him process what had happened. He was quiet, his mind clearly racing through 3 years of moves and countermoves, recontextualizing everything Elena had done through the lens of it being an elaborate test. The apartment where Tommy had been staying was a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood. The guards posted outside straightened when Roman approached, their expressions uncertain. Everyone had heard about the quarry confrontation by now, about Elena's revelation. No one quite knew what it meant for the organization. Tommy was sitting on the couch watching TV when they entered, looking thinner and more exhausted than he had 4 days ago. He started to stand when he saw Roman, then seemed to think better of it and stayed seated. Did you know? Roman asked without preamble. Did Elena tell you it was a test? Tommy's confusion was genuine. Tell me what was a test, boss. The whole operation. The 3 years of gathering intelligence, the payments, the warehouse hit. Elena just told me it was all an elaborate test that Salvatore set up before he died. A way to push me until I either broke or proved I could handle the pressure. Roman's voice was controlled but strained. So I'm asking you, did you know you weren't actually betraying me? That it was all staged? The color drained from Tommy's face. No, I swear, boss, I had no idea. Elena made it sound real. The money was real. The threats were real. She told me that if I didn't cooperate, I'd end up dead or in prison. She told me you'd stolen Salvatore's empire and that helping her was justice. His hands were shaking. Are you saying none of it was true? That I destroyed my life for a test? Roman sank into a chair across from the kid, suddenly looking exhausted. I don't know what was true and what wasn't. Elena said she was testing me, but maybe she was also testing you. Or maybe the test was real for everyone except her. I honestly can't tell anymore. So what happens now? Tommy's voice cracked. You let me live in this apartment forever? Send me away? I shot Marco. Even if it was all part of Elena's game, I still did that. Marco's fine. Barely a graze once the Kevlar did its job. Roman rubbed his face. As for what happens to you, that depends. Do you want to stay in this life? Work for me knowing that even the betrayals might be tests, that nothing is quite what it seems? I'm 20 years old. Tommy's laugh was broken. I don't know what I want except to stop feeling like I'm drowning. Elena offered me an exit, and I took it because I couldn't see any other way out. But it was all fake. The money, the promises, the freedom she offered, all of it was just another cage. Naomi watched Roman struggle with the decision, saw him weighing justice against mercy, punishment against compassion. Finally, he stood and moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. You get a real exit, Roman said quietly. Not Elena's fake version, but an actual one. I'll set you up with enough money to start over somewhere far from here. New identity if you want it, college tuition, whatever you need to build a legitimate life outside this world. He turned to face Tommy. But you walk away clean. No coming back, no staying in touch, no looking over your shoulder wondering if I'm going to change my mind. You get one chance to be someone who never met me. Take it or don't, but decide now. Tommy stared at him in disbelief. After everything I did, you're just letting me go? I'm giving you what I wish someone had given me at your age, a real choice about what kind of life you want to live. Whether you take it or waste it is on you. Roman's expression was hard but not unkind. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, the offer's gone, and you're back to being just another kid who made bad choices. They left Tommy sitting there, still processing. In the hallway, Marco caught Roman's arm. Boss, I know you're trying to be better, but letting him walk after what he did. Some of the others aren't going to understand. Then they can leave too. Roman's voice was firm. I'm done running an organization based on fear and violence. Salvatore built this empire on loyalty and smart business. Elena tested whether I could maintain it under pressure. Well, I passed her test. Now I'm going to prove I can transform it into something that doesn't require constant war to survive. That's going to take time and resources, and a lot of people aren't going to like it. Marco's expression was worried. You could lose everything trying to go legitimate. I've already lost 20 years trying to be someone I'm not. Roman looked at Naomi. I'm not losing anything else. The transformation started slowly. Roman began the careful process of dismantling his criminal operations while strengthening his legitimate businesses. The gambling and protection rackets were shut down entirely. The money laundering networks were redirected to legal financial services. The smuggling operations were converted to standard import-export with proper licensing and customs compliance. It wasn't clean. People who'd made their living from Roman's criminal enterprises found themselves out of work or forced to transition to legitimate roles that paid less and offered fewer opportunities for corruption. Some left willingly. Others had to be pushed out with severance packages and careful management to prevent them from becoming enemies. Elena's test had apparently included planting detailed documentation of Roman's illegal activities with federal authorities, time to be discovered if he'd failed whatever criteria she'd been measuring him against. Roman found the evidence packages before they could be delivered and destroyed them, but the discovery made him paranoid about what other safeguards Elena had put in place. She could have burned me 100 different ways, he told Naomi one night, as they reviewed financial records in what had become their shared office. Every illegal operation I ran, she documented. Every bribe I paid, every corner I cut, every person I threatened, she had proof. If I'd broken under her pressure, if I'd done something that proved I was unworthy of Salvatore's legacy, she would have destroyed me. But you didn't break. Naomi looked up from her laptop where she was helping him catalog his legitimate holdings. And she didn't destroy you. So maybe instead of obsessing over what could have happened, focus on what did happen. You survived. You adapted. You're becoming someone different. Someone better? His voice held doubt. Someone more honest, at least. That's a start. She reached across the desk to take his hand. How long until you're completely legitimate? 6 months if we're aggressive about it. A year if we're careful. Roman squeezed her hand. The problem is that going legitimate means giving up the leverage that kept me safe. Right now, people are afraid to move against me because I have the resources to retaliate. Once I'm just a businessman, that protection disappears. So you build different protection. Legal contracts instead of threats. Court systems instead of personal enforcement. Insurance and security companies instead of armed guards. Naomi had been learning the business, understanding the mechanics of Roman's empire. It's not as dramatic, but it's more stable. It's also boring. Roman smiled slightly. Which is exactly what I want. Boring and safe and completely predictable. They'd been living in a house Roman owned in the suburbs of Burlington, close enough to Millbrook Falls that Naomi could visit her bookstore regularly, but far enough that they had distance from her old life. The bookstore was being managed by a woman Naomi had trained, allowing her to step back from daily operations while she helped Roman navigate his transformation. It was strange, this new life they were building together. They'd gone from childhood friendship to 20 years of separation to reuniting in the middle of a criminal war to this, domestic partnership filled with spreadsheets and strategic planning. Not romantic in any conventional sense, but real in ways that mattered more. 3 months after Elena's revelation, Marco came to them with news. Dante's dead. Heart attack, just like his uncle. Happened 2 days ago. Elena's taking over the family operations officially. Roman's expression was unreadable. Convenient timing. You think Elena killed him? I think Elena does whatever serves her purposes. If Dante was a liability, if he was interfering with whatever long-term plan she has, then yeah, she'd remove him. Roman leaned back in his chair. Did she send a message with the news? Marco pulled out his phone and read from a text. Your final test is complete. Salvatore would approve of the man you've become. Don't waste it. Final test. Roman's laugh was bitter. She's telling me that Dante was part of it too. That his aggression, his moves against my territory, maybe even his discovery of Naomi, all of it was orchestrated by Elena to see how I'd respond. Naomi felt cold. She put me in danger deliberately. used me as a pressure point to test you. And I responded by choosing to protect you instead of sacrificing you for strategic advantage, which apparently was the right answer. Roman's hands clenched. I should be furious, should want revenge for the manipulation, but mostly I'm just tired. Then be tired, Naomi said quietly. Be tired and angry and done with all of it. That's allowed. Over the next few months, they fell into a rhythm. Roman continued dismantling his criminal empire while building up his legitimate businesses. He started a consulting firm that helped other criminals transition to legal operations, using his experience and connections to create pathways out of the life for people who wanted them. It was ironic and slightly hypocritical, but it was also genuinely helpful. Naomi reopened her bookstore in Millbrook Falls, returning to the quiet town that had been her refuge for a decade. Roman's security presence was lighter now, just one or two discreet guards instead of an entire team. The town had accepted the explanation that Naomi had been helping a childhood friend through a difficult business transition. People asked questions, but not too many. Small towns were good at minding their own business when they wanted to be. Tommy sent a postcard from Arizona 5 months after Roman had given him his exit. No return address, just a brief message. Enrolled in community college, studying computer science. Thank you for the second chance. I won't waste it. Roman kept the postcard on his desk, a reminder that mercy sometimes paid unexpected dividends. The 1-year anniversary of Roman's return to Millbrook Falls fell on a cold November day. Naomi woke in the bedroom of the house they'd bought together, a renovated farmhouse halfway between Burlington and her bookstore. Roman was already awake, standing at the window and looking out at the early morning frost. Can't sleep? She asked, thinking about the bridge. He turned to face her, and in the dawn light he looked younger, less weighted down. About the promise I made there 20 years ago. That you'd come back when you were strong enough to protect me. Naomi got out of bed and moved to stand beside him. You kept it. Took you longer than either of us planned, but you kept it. I kept the letter of it, but the spirit, he shook his head. I came back strong, but that strength was built on violence and fear. I protected you by being dangerous enough that people were afraid to come after you. That's not what that 13-year-old kid on the bridge meant when he made his promise. Maybe not, but it's what he became capable of when life pushed him into corners. Naomi took his hand. And now you're becoming someone else. Someone who's still strong but doesn't need violence to prove it. That's not betraying the boy on the bridge. That's honoring him by proving he survived. Roman pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. Do you ever regret it? Letting me back into your life? You could have told me to leave that first night, could have built a quiet life without any of this chaos. I had a quiet life. It was safe and boring and lonely. Naomi wrapped her arms around him. This is messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying, but it's real. And I'd rather have real and messy with you than safe and lonely without you. I love you. The words came easier now than they had 8 months ago. I need you to know that. Whatever I was, whatever I'm becoming, that's the one constant. I love you. I love you too. Naomi pulled back enough to look at his face. So what do we do today? How do we mark 1 year of the strange new life we're building? Roman smiled, and it reached his eyes for the first time in days. We go back to the bridge, the actual bridge, the one where I made you that promise, and we figure out what the next 20 years should look like. The drive to their old foster care town took 2 hours. The place had changed, new developments replacing old landmarks, the school they'd attended now a community center, but the bridge was still there, the same crumbling stone structure over a creek that ran shallow in November. They parked and walked out onto the bridge together, their breath-forming clouds in the cold air. The railing where 13-year-old Roman had stood was still marked with graffiti, new layers added over the years, but the old scars still visible underneath. I stood right here, Roman said quietly, pointing to a spot on the railing, trying to convince myself that jumping was better than going back to Jimmy's house. And then you showed up. I'd followed you from school, knew something was wrong, knew you were hurting. Naomi stood beside him, looking down at the water below. I didn't know what to say to make it better, so I just started talking, telling you about books I'd read, about characters who survived impossible things, about how life had to get better eventually. You made me promise I wouldn't jump, said the world needed people who understood what it was like to hurt, because those were the only people who could help others. Roman's voice was rough with memory. I made you promise something too. Do you remember? You made me promise I'd wait for you, that I'd give you time to get strong enough to protect both of us, and then you'd come back and we'd both be safe. Naomi turned to face him. I kept that promise for 5 years. Then I accepted you weren't coming back and tried to move on. But I never really stopped waiting, did I? Some part of me was always looking for you. And some part of me was always trying to get back here. To this bridge, to you, to the promise I made when I was too young to understand what it would cost to keep it. Roman took both her hands. I'm here now. I'm strong, but not in the way I thought I'd be. I'm ready, but not for the life I imagined. And I'm asking you, is this enough? Am I enough? Naomi looked at him, really looked at the man he'd become. The scars from his childhood were still there, visible in the way he tensed when unexpected sounds came from the woods, the way he calculated exits and threats without conscious thought. But there were new things, too. Laugh lines starting to form around his eyes, a softness in his expression when he looked at her, hands that reached for her instead of weapons. You're more than enough, she said firmly. You're complicated and damaged and trying so hard to be better. You're strong enough to be vulnerable, smart enough to ask for help, brave enough to change everything you built when it stopped serving who you wanted to be. That's not the boy I knew on this bridge 20 years ago, and it's not the crime boss who showed up in 3 black SUVs last November. It's someone new, someone I'm still getting to know, and I want to keep knowing him for the next 20 years and the 20 after that. Roman's eyes were bright with emotion. He didn't bother hiding anymore. Then let's make a new promise. Not the one those scared kids made, but one these complicated adults can actually keep. Okay, Naomi squeezed his hands. You first. I promise to keep choosing you every day, in every decision. You're the priority. Not the empire, not the reputation, not the power. You. His voice was steady, despite the emotion. And I promise to keep trying to be someone worthy of that choice. Someone who's strong enough to be gentle, brave enough to be honest, smart enough to know when I'm wrong. I promise to keep calling you on your bullshit, Naomi said, and he laughed. To push back when you're being controlling, to remind you that you don't have to solve every problem with strategy and leverage. And I promise to be patient while you figure out who you are when you're not in survival mode. To love all the versions of you, the boy on the bridge, the crime boss, the man trying to go legitimate, whoever you become next. That's a lot of versions to love. Good thing I'm committed to the long term. She pulled him down for a kiss, and this one was different from all the ones that had come before. Not desperate or dangerous or weighted with crisis, just present, just real. They stood on the bridge for a long time, watching the water flow beneath them, 2 people who'd survived impossible things and found their way back to each other. Eventually, Roman pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that made Naomi's heart skip. I know we're doing everything backwards, he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver band with a small diamond. We started with the crisis and worked our way back to the getting to know you part. But I'm tired of waiting for the right moment or the perfect circumstances. I'm tired of being strategic about the one thing in my life that's never been strategic. Roman, let me finish. He took the ring from the box with slightly shaking hands. I'm not asking you to marry me right now. We're not ready for that, and I know it. But I'm asking you to agree that we're heading in that direction. That this thing we're building is permanent, even if it's messy. That when I finally get my life sorted out enough to deserve you, you'll still be here. Naomi looked at the ring, then at his face, then back at the ring. You're proposing a pre-proposal. That's very you. Is that a yes? It's a yes to the direction, a yes to permanence, a yes to building something together even though neither of us has any idea what we're doing. She held out her hand and let him slide the ring onto her finger. But when you actually propose, Roman Varela, you better do it right. I want romance and planning and you on one knee, not standing on a bridge where you almost killed yourself 20 years ago. He laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Deal. I'll make it perfect. Don't make it perfect. Make it real. She kissed him again. That's all I've ever wanted from you. Real, honest, messy truth instead of perfect strategies. They left the bridge hand in hand, walking back to the car as the morning sun finally broke through the November clouds. The drive back to their farmhouse was quiet, but comfortable. the kind of silence that came from knowing someone well enough that words weren't always necessary. Over the next 6 months, Roman completed his transition to legitimate business. The last of his criminal operations were shut down or sold off to people who promised to run them with less violence. His consulting firm grew, helping other criminals find exits when they were ready. He lost some people who couldn't or wouldn't make the change with him, but he kept the ones who mattered, Marco, Sophia, and a core team who'd been loyal through everything. Naomi's bookstore thrived. She expanded it, adding a small cafe and a space for community events. The town embraced her again, accepting Roman as a reformed businessman who'd made mistakes but was trying to do better. They got knowing looks sometimes, comments about how nice it was to see childhood friends reconnect. Nobody pushed for details. That was the beauty of small towns. They protected their own. They got a dog, which was ridiculous and domestic and exactly what they needed. A rescue mutt named Harvey, who had anxiety issues and didn't like loud noises but loved Naomi with fierce devotion. Roman spent hours training the dog, learning patience in a way that fighting and strategy had never taught him. Elena sent a gift when she heard about Roman's completed transition, a bottle of Salvatore's favorite whiskey with a note that said simply, "He would be proud." Roman kept the bottle but never opened it, unwilling to toast with a woman who'd put them through hell in the name of testing his character. Dante's death remained officially a heart attack. Nobody investigated too closely. That was the way of their world. Some questions were better left unasked. Some deaths were accepted at face value because digging deeper served no purpose. The actual proposal happened on a Thursday afternoon in April. Naomi was in the bookstore helping a customer when Roman walked in, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. He waited until the customer left, then locked the front door and turned the sign to closed. "Roman, it's the middle of the day. I know, but I've been planning this for 3 weeks, and if I wait any longer, I'm going to lose my nerve." He took her hand and led her to the reading nook in the back of the store, the cozy corner with overstuffed chairs and good lighting that had always been her favorite spot. And there, scattered across the floor and chairs, were books. Dozens of them, all lying open to specific pages. "What is this?" Naomi asked. "Every book you ever told me about when we were kids. Every story you used to escape, every character you loved, every world you wished you could live in." Roman's voice was shaking slightly. "I tracked them all down. Took me 2 months and way too much money, but I found them. And I marked the passages that made me think of you, the strong characters who survived impossible things, the love stories that were messy but real, the endings that weren't perfect but were honest." Naomi looked around at the books, recognizing titles from 20 years ago. Stories she'd used to talk a scared boy off a bridge, narratives she'd shared during lunch periods in foster care, characters who'd been more real to her than most actual people in her childhood. "Roman, I'm not done." He knelt in front of her, and she realized he was actually doing it, the traditional proposal she'd jokingly demanded 8 months ago. "Naomi Hart, you saved my life when we were 13. You did it again when I came back last November, even though I brought nothing but danger and chaos. You've been patient while I figured out who I am without the violence. You've been honest when I needed to hear hard truths. You've been exactly what I needed at every turn, even when I didn't deserve it." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she let them fall without wiping them away. "So I'm asking you, in this bookstore you built from broken pieces, surrounded by the stories that kept us both alive when nothing else could, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the faith you've shown in me? Will you build this messy, complicated, imperfect life with me?" "Yes." The word came out choked with emotion. "Yes to all of it. The mess and the complications and the imperfection. Yes to you, Roman. Every version of you." He slid a new ring onto her finger, a different one from the promise ring, this one custom designed with intertwined silver and gold bands. "The silver is for the boy on the bridge. The gold is for the man I'm becoming. Together, they're stronger than either one alone." She pulled him up and kissed him hard, tasting salt from her tears and feeling his hand shake as they framed her face. Around them, the books lay open to passages about courage and survival and love that conquered impossible odds. It was romantic and sentimental, and exactly the kind of gesture she'd needed from him. Proof that underneath the strategy and control, there was still someone who understood the power of stories. They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony at the farmhouse. Marco was Roman's best man. Sophia stood with Naomi. Tommy sent a video message from Arizona, looking healthy and younger than he had in Burlington, congratulating them and thanking Roman again for the exit he'd been given. The ceremony was simple, the vows they wrote themselves, the kiss at the end sweet and unhurried. Elena sent another gift, a first edition of the book Naomi had used to talk Roman off the bridge 20 years ago. The note said, "For the woman who passed the most important test of all, she saw who he could become and loved him anyway." The reception was small but warm. People from Millbrook Falls mixed with Roman's reformed business associates. Marco got drunk and told embarrassing stories about Roman's early days running Salvatore's empire. Sophia cried, which nobody had ever seen her do. The dog howled along with the music, which everyone agreed was the highlight of the evening. As the party wound down, Roman and Naomi slipped away to the farmhouse porch, needing a moment of quiet after the chaos of celebration. The July evening was warm and filled with fireflies, the Vermont woods dark and peaceful around them. "We did it," Naomi said quietly, leaning against him. "We actually built something good out of all that mess." "We're still building it," Roman corrected. "This isn't the ending. It's just the part where we get to breathe for a while. What do you think comes next?" "I don't know. And for the first time in my life, that doesn't terrify me." He kissed the top of her head. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. That's enough." They stood there in the summer darkness, two people who'd survived foster care and violence and manipulation and crisis, who'd found their way back to each other after 20 years, who'd chosen to build something real instead of something perfect. The promise made on a crumbling bridge by two scared kids had been kept, transformed, exceeded. Inside the farmhouse, their friends were laughing. Harvey was probably stealing food from unattended plates. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, running legitimate businesses, navigating marriage, figuring out how to be normal after years of operating in extremes. But tonight, they had this moment, this peace, this hard-won happiness that nobody could take from them. And that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.